The chandelier catches fire just as the maid raises her champagne glass. "Before this night ends," Arya whispers into the microphone, her voice cutting through the chaos, "someone in this room will lose everything they've built on lies." The ballroom freezes. Lena Varelli's face drains white. 3 months of scrubbing floors, swallowing insults, eating scraps, all for this single moment. The woman who called her worthless has no idea she's been serving a billionaire CEO breakfast in bed. And now, with 500 witnesses watching, the truth is about to detonate. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to where this really started, and I promise you, it's worth every minute. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The smell of old money has a specific texture. It's leather-bound books no one reads, imported lilies replaced daily, and marble so cold it makes your bones ache. Arya Cole learned this within her first hour inside the Varelli estate, her knees pressed against bathroom tile that probably cost more than most people's cars. "You missed a spot." Lena Varelli's voice dripped with the kind of contempt that comes from never having to clean anything herself. She stood in the doorway wearing a silk robe that cost $4,000. Arya knew because she'd researched every detail of this family's spending habits. The blonde woman pointed one manicured finger at a corner Arya had already scrubbed twice. "Yes, ma'am." Arya kept her eyes down, her voice small. "I'll fix it right away." "See that you do. And next time, don't use so much product. It smells cheap." Lena wrinkled her nose. "Rather like you, actually." The bathroom door clicked shut. Arya stayed on her knees for exactly 10 seconds longer, counting her breaths the way her therapist taught her during the hostile takeover of her first company. Then she allowed herself one tiny smile. 3 months, she reminded herself. Just 3 months of this, and you'll have everything you need. In another life, her real life, Arya Cole ran a tech empire worth $2.3 billion. She had 1,400 employees, offices in 9 countries, and a reputation for seeing through corporate bullshit faster than anyone in the industry. She'd built her company from a college dorm room idea into something that made venture capitalists salivate. But right now, she was Emma Cooper, a 26-year-old woman desperate for work, grateful for minimum wage, and a basement room that smelled like mildew. She'd gotten the job through a temp agency, complete with fake references that would hold up under standard scrutiny. The agency specialized in placing domestic workers in high-end households, and Arya had paid them generously to ask no questions about her background check. To the Varellis, she was invisible, another face in the rotation of staff who kept their mansion running while they focused on the important business of being rich. That invisibility was exactly what Arya needed. The estate sprawled across 40 acres of Connecticut countryside, all rolling lawns and imported stone. The main house had been built in 1924 by some railroad baron, then restored by Dominic Varelli's father in the 80s. Now it served as the primary residence for Dominic, his wife Lena, and whatever parade of house guests and hangers-on needed a place to be seen. Arya's room was in the staff quarters, a converted section of what used to be servants' housing. She shared a bathroom with 2 other maids and ate her meals in a small kitchen separated from the main house. The other staff were kind enough. Rosa, the head housekeeper, had taken a protective interest in the new girl who seemed too fragile for this kind of work. "Don't let Mrs. Varelli get to you," Rosa had told her on the second day, her Spanish accent softening the words. "She's like this with everyone, especially the pretty ones." Arya had ducked her head, playing shy. "I'm not pretty." "Honey, you're gorgeous. You just hide it well." Rosa handed her a stack of fresh linens. "That's probably smart around here. Mr. Varelli doesn't notice much, but his wife notices everything." That was the first useful piece of intelligence. Lena Varelli was territorial, insecure, and mean. Dominic Varelli was distracted, absent, and possibly blind to what happened in his own house. Arya filed it away with everything else. The partnership that brought Arya here had appeared in a quarterly filing 3 months ago. Varelli Industries, a sprawling conglomerate of construction, real estate, and private equity, had entered into a $200 million joint venture with a shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands. The deal structure was complex enough to be legal, but weird enough to trigger Arya's instincts. She'd seen this pattern before. Money laundering, usually. Sometimes fraud. Occasionally something worse. The Shell Corporation had ties, buried deep but traceable, to one of Arya's suppliers. That supplier provided specialized components for her company's manufacturing division. If Varelli Industries was dirty, and if that dirt splashed back on her supply chain, Arya's entire company could face regulatory hell. She'd brought it to her board. They'd recommended hiring investigators, lawyers, the usual corporate warfare toolkit. Arya had thanked them politely and done exactly the opposite. Because here's what 6 years of building a company from nothing teaches you. Sometimes the only way to know the truth is to see it yourself. Reports can be falsified. Investigators can be bought. But if you're standing in someone's house, watching how they move through the world when they think no one important is looking, you learn things no due diligence report can capture. So she'd created Emma Cooper, secured the job, and disappeared into a world where her Harvard, MBA, and Fortune 500 profile meant exactly nothing. Duh. Her first week was mostly observation. The house ran on a strict schedule. Dominic left for his office at 7 every morning, driven by a chauffeur in a black Mercedes. Lena slept until 10, sometimes 11, then spent her days shopping, lunching, or hosting whatever fundraiser justified her existence. The real power in the house belonged to Marcus, Dominic's assistant, who worked from a converted library and seemed to handle everything his boss didn't have time for. Marcus was 35, efficient, and completely devoted to Dominic in a way that suggested either exceptional loyalty or something more complicated. Then there was Gregory, the estate manager, who oversaw the grounds and staff with military precision. He'd served in the army before taking this job, and he treated the household like a tactical operation. Arya stayed beneath their notice. She cleaned bathrooms, changed sheets, polished silver that would be used once and forgotten. She made herself small, boring, unremarkable, and she listened. Mrs. Varelli wants the Blue Room prepared for guests this weekend, Gregory announced during a staff meeting. Senator Blake and his wife will be staying through Monday. Rosa nodded, making notes. Any dietary restrictions? The senator is allergic to shellfish. His wife prefers everything gluten-free, but she'll eat bread if she thinks no one's watching. Gregory's mouth twitched. Just stock both options. Arya filed that away too. Senator Blake chaired the committee overseeing commercial development regulations. His presence here wasn't social, it was transactional. The guests arrived Friday evening. Arya was assigned to turn down their room and ensure fresh flowers were placed on the nightstand. She performed her duties silently, noting the monogrammed luggage, the prescription bottles in the senator's shaving kit, the burner phone tucked into Mrs. Blake's purse. People who had nothing to hide didn't carry burner phones to weekend social visits. By week 3, Arya had settled into a rhythm. Wake at 5, shower in the cramped staff bathroom, dress in her shapeless gray uniform. Breakfast was whatever Rosa put out, usually toast and coffee strong enough to strip paint. Then the work began. Lena's bedroom was always a disaster. Clothes everywhere, makeup scattered across surfaces, half-empty wine glasses on the nightstand. Arya cleaned it while Lena slept, moving silently through the space like a ghost. "You're getting better at being invisible," Lena said one morning, startling Arya so badly she nearly dropped a champagne flute. The blonde woman was awake, propped up on silk pillows, watching Arya with the detached interest of someone observing an ant farm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to disturb you." "You didn't disturb me. You never disturb me. That's the point." Lena stretched, cat-like. "You're the perfect servant. Quiet, efficient, completely forgettable." "Thank you, ma'am." It wasn't a compliment. Lena's smile had edges. "I'm just observing that you know your place. So many girls come through here thinking they're special, thinking if they're pretty enough or sweet enough, someone will notice them, rescue them." She laughed, light and cruel. "But you're smarter than that, aren't you?" Arya kept her expression neutral. "I'm just here to work, ma'am." "Good. Keep it that way." Lena waved a dismissive hand. "You can go. And tell Rosa I want lunch at 1. Something light." Arya escaped to the hallway, her heart pounding. Not from fear, from fury. The casual cruelty of it, the assumption that she could say anything she wanted because the person hearing it didn't matter. 2 more months, Arya reminded herself. Then we'll see who's forgettable. The breakthrough came during week 5, in the least expected place, the trash. Arya had been assigned to empty the wastebaskets in Dominic's home office, a room she'd only entered a handful of times. It was masculine and austere, all dark wood and leather, with photographs of construction projects lining the walls. Dominic himself was rarely there. He preferred working from his downtown office, but the space still felt occupied, lived in. She was emptying the shredder bin when she noticed it, a fragment of paper maybe 2 inches wide that had jammed in the mechanism instead of being destroyed. The text was partial, but enough was visible to make her pause. Transferred to LLC. Approved by DV. Compliance concerns raised by. Arya's pulse quickened. She pulled out her phone, pretending to check a message while actually photographing the fragment. Then she cleared the jam and continued her work, forcing herself to move at normal speed. That night, in her basement room, she studied the photo. The fragment alone proved nothing, but it confirmed her suspicions. Someone inside Varelli Industries had compliance concerns about the Cayman deal. Someone had raised flags, and those flags had been ignored. "Emma, you have a visitor." Rosa found Arya in the laundry room, folding the endless stream of designer clothes Lena went through daily. Arya looked up, genuinely confused. No one knew she was here. That was the entire point. "A visitor? For me?" "Says she's your sister." Rosa looked uncertain. "She's waiting in the staff entrance. You want me to tell her you're busy?" Arya's mind raced. She didn't have a sister, which meant this was either a catastrophic security breach or... She followed Rosa to the staff entrance, where a woman in her early 30s stood waiting. Tall, black, wearing a power suit that looked out of place in the service area. Arya recognized her immediately. Simone Chen, her chief legal officer. "Damn it." "Hi, sis," Simone said, her smile tight. "Got a minute?" They walked to the edge of the property, far enough from the house to avoid being overheard. The moment they were clear, Simone dropped the pretense. "What the hell are you doing?" "My job," Arya said quietly. "Your job is running a company, not playing undercover maid in some billionaire's mansion." Simone's voice was sharp with worry. "The board is losing their minds. You've been gone 5 weeks with minimal contact. Nathan is fielding calls from investors asking where you are." Nathan Torres was Arya's COO, one of the few people who knew the truth about her current location. He'd been against this plan from the start. "Tell Nathan I'm fine. Tell the board I'm conducting field research." Arya crossed her arms. "And tell me how you found me." "Your assistant. She's worried about you." Simone's expression softened slightly. "We all are. I'm fine. You're working as a maid for minimum wage while a woman who wouldn't last 5 minutes in the real world treats you like furniture." Simone shook her head. "This isn't fine. This is insane. This is necessary." Arya met her friend's eyes. "I found something. Evidence that someone internally raised compliance concerns about the Cayman deal. That means Dominic Varelli either ignored the warnings or never saw them. Either way, I need to know which." "Then hire investigators." "Investigators can't tell me who Dominic Varelli actually is." Arya's voice was firm. "They can't tell me if he's dirty or just negligent. They can't tell me if this is his operation or if someone's running it behind his back. I need to see inside this world, Simone. I need to understand it." Simone was quiet for a long moment. Then, "And Lena Varelli? What's she got to do with any of this?" "Probably nothing. She's just..." Arya paused, choosing words carefully. "Unpleasant. She's cruel. Rosa told me stories while I was waiting." Simone's jaw tightened. "You don't have to endure this." "Yes, I do. Because the moment I walk away, I lose access. And if this deal is dirty and it blows back on us, we're not talking about bad press. We're talking about federal investigations, frozen assets, destroyed careers." Arya's voice went quiet. "I built my company from nothing. I won't let someone else's corruption tear it down." Simone studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed, reaching into her bag. "Fine, but you're not doing this without backup." She handed Arya a small device, no bigger than a lipstick. "GPS tracker. Keep it on you. If something goes wrong, we'll know where you are." Arya took it, grateful. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll be careful." Simone squeezed her hand. "And for what it's worth, when this is over and you destroy whoever needs destroying, I want to watch." Despite everything, Arya smiled. deal. Voilà. The dynamic shifted after week 6. Lena, who had mostly ignored Arya beyond the occasional cruel comment, suddenly developed an interest in her newest maid. It started small. Questions about Arya's background, her family, where she'd worked before. Arya stuck to her cover story, raised in foster care, no college, bouncing between jobs. She made herself sound desperate, grateful, a little stupid. Lena ate it up. "You know what I think?" Lena said one afternoon, watching Arya organize her closet. "I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Some people are meant to lead, and some people are meant to serve. You're a server. Nothing wrong with that." "No, ma'am. I mean, look at me. I was born for this life. Private schools, debutante balls, summers in the Hamptons. I knew from childhood that I was destined for something important." She held up 2 dresses, considering. "What were you doing at 16? Arya had been coding her first app and planning her emancipation from a foster system that had failed her repeatedly. But Emma Cooper had been doing something much simpler. "Working at a diner, ma'am." "See, that's what I mean. We all have our place." Lena selected a dress, handing it to Arya to hang. "The trick is accepting it. You've accepted yours, and that's admirable in its own way." Arya said nothing, focusing on the task. Inside, she was calculating. This wasn't random cruelty anymore. This was something else. Lena was testing her, pushing to see how much she could take. The question was why. The answer came 2 days later, delivered in an offhand comment that Lena probably thought was meaningless. "We're having a gala," she announced during breakfast. Arya was refilling coffee cups while Dominic scrolled through his phone, barely listening. 3 weeks from Saturday. 200 guests, full formal event. I'll need extra staff, obviously. "I'll coordinate with the catering company," Marcus said, making notes. "Good. And Marcus?" Lena's smile was sharp. "Make sure Emma is working that night. I want her on coat check." Something about the way she said it made Arya's instincts flare. This wasn't about needing staff. This was personal. Dominic finally looked up from his phone. "Who's Emma?" "One of the maids, darling. You wouldn't notice." Lena patted his hand. "Don't worry about it." But Arya noticed the way Lena watched her for the rest of the meal, the way her smile had edges. Whatever game Lena was playing, the gala was part of it. Fine. Arya could play games too. That evening, Arya finally got her first real look at Dominic Varelli up close. She'd been cleaning the library when he walked in, clearly looking for something. He was 42, tall, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and the kind of face that would age well. He wore his wealth comfortably, but not ostentatiously. Good suit, expensive watch, nothing flashy. "Sorry," he said, noticing her. "Didn't realize anyone was in here." "I can come back, sir." "No, you're fine. I just need—" He scanned the shelves, frowning. There was a blue folder. Marcus must have moved it. Arya had seen the folder earlier, misfiled with some contracts. She retrieved it, handing it over. "Thank you." He paused. "I don't think we've met." "Emma, sir. I started about 6 weeks ago." "Right. Emma." He took the folder, but his attention had shifted. He was actually looking at her now, really looking. "Are you settling in okay? The staff treating you well?" It was such a normal question, asked with what seemed like genuine interest, that Arya was momentarily thrown. She'd expected Dominic to be like his wife, cold, dismissive, cruel, but his expression was kind, concerned even. "Yes, sir. Everyone's been very welcoming." "Good. That's good." He hesitated, then, "My wife can be demanding sometimes. If she's giving you trouble, you can talk to Rosa or Marcus. They'll handle it." Arya blinked. Was Dominic Varelli actually apologizing for his wife? "I appreciate that, sir. But Mrs. Varelli has been fine." He didn't look convinced, but he nodded. "All right. Well, the offer stands." He started to leave, then turned back. "And Emma? Thank you for finding this. I've been looking for it all day." After he left, Arya stood in the empty library, recalibrating everything she thought she knew about this family. Dominic Varelli wasn't a monster. He might not even be particularly bad. He was just distracted, busy, running an empire while his wife ran their household like a personal fiefdom, which made the Cayman deal even more interesting. If Dominic wasn't actively dirty, then someone else was pulling strings. Someone with access to his company, his finances, his signature. Arya needed to find out who, what. Week 8 brought a new complication. Julian Reeves. He arrived on a Tuesday, carried in on a wave of expensive cologne and easy charm. Lena's younger brother, visiting from Manhattan for an extended stay. He was 30, handsome in that effortless way rich men often are, and completely aware of the effect he had on women. "Well, hello," he said, finding Arya in the hallway. "You're new." "I've been here 2 months, sir." "2 months? And Lena's been hiding you?" His smile was all teeth. "That's very selfish of her." Arya kept her expression neutral. "Can I help you with something?" "I'm looking for my sister. Have you seen her?" "I believe she's in the conservatory, sir." "Perfect." He started to walk away, then paused. "What's your name?" "Emma." "Emma." He tested it out. Pretty name for a pretty girl. After he left, Arya allowed herself an eye roll. Julian Reeves was going to be a problem, not because he was dangerous, but because he was bored and looking for entertainment. She'd have to be careful around him. The 8th week also brought her first real evidence. She'd been assigned to clean Dominic's home office again, a task she'd grown familiar with. This time, she was dusting his desk when she noticed something odd. A drawer that didn't quite close all the way, as if something inside was preventing it from shutting completely. Arya glanced at the door. Empty hallway. She had maybe 5 minutes before Rosa did her rounds. She opened the drawer carefully. Inside was a stack of folders, nothing unusual. But wedged behind them, almost deliberately hidden, was a small notebook. Black leather, no label. Arya photographed every page, working quickly. The notebook contained handwritten notes, meeting dates, dollar amounts, initials she didn't recognize. Some entries were circled, others crossed out. It looked like someone's personal tracking system, completely separate from official records. The handwriting wasn't Dominic's. She'd seen enough of his signatures to know, which meant someone else was using his office to record unofficial business. She returned everything exactly as she'd found it and finished her cleaning. Then she went back to her room and spent 3 hours analyzing the photographs, cross-referencing dates and amounts against public records of Varelli Industries transactions. The pattern that emerged made her stomach tight. Every circled entry corresponded to a payment from the Cayman Shell Corporation. Every crossed-out entry matched a compliance report filed with Varelli's legal department. Someone was systematically tracking how to move money while avoiding internal oversight. And whoever that someone was, they were operating right under Dominic's nose. "Dean, you're distracted." Rosa's voice pulled Arya back to the present. They were in the kitchen, prepping for dinner service. "Sorry, just tired." "You work too hard." Rosa handed her a plate of cookies, fresh from the oven. "Eat, you're too skinny." Arya accepted one, grateful for the kindness. Rosa had become something like a friend over the past weeks, or as much of a friend as possible when you were living a lie. "Rosa, can I ask you something?" "Of course, mija. How long have you worked here?" 12 years. Started when Mr. Varelli's father was still alive." Rosa's expression softened. "That was a good man. Tough, but fair. He treated the staff like family." "And Dominic?" "Mr. Varelli is..." Rosa chose her words carefully. "He's a good man too, but he's busy. Always working, always traveling. He trusts the wrong people sometimes." "Like his wife?" Rosa's silence was answer enough. "What about Marcus?" Arya pressed gently. "He seems devoted." "Marcus would do anything for Mr. Varelli. Anything." Rosa's tone suggested layers of meaning Arya wasn't meant to understand. "He's been with him for 10 years, started as an intern, worked his way up. Now he's basically running everything while Mr. Varelli focuses on the big picture." That was interesting. Marcus had access to everything. Dominic's schedule, his files, his finances. If someone inside was orchestrating the Cayman deal, Marcus was the perfect candidate. Arya filed that away with everything else. The gala preparation consumed the household. Lena was in her element, ordering everyone around with manic intensity. Flowers had to be perfect. Food had to be exquisite. Guest list had to include exactly the right mix of old money and new power. And through it all, she kept mentioning Emma. Make sure Emma is available that night. Emma should handle the coat check. I want Emma visible. It was weird enough that even Rosa noticed. I don't know what she's planning, the older woman said, but be careful. When Mrs. Varelli takes an interest in someone, it's never good. Arya had her own suspicions. Lena was setting something up, some public humiliation designed to put the uppity maid in her place. Maybe she'd sensed that Arya wasn't quite as broken as she pretended. Maybe she just enjoyed cruelty for its own sake. Either way, Arya was ready. Because while Lena had been planning her little performance, Arya had been planning something much bigger. 10 days before the gala, everything came together. Arya had spent weeks gathering pieces, the shredded document, the hidden notebook, the financial records, witness statements from other staff members about suspicious visitors. She'd photographed everything, documented everything, built a case that could withstand scrutiny. And finally, she had confirmation. The Cayman deal was dirty. Money was being laundered through the Shell Corporation, then cycled back into Varelli Industries as consulting fees and project investments. The amounts were staggering, not just the initial $200 million, but another $300 million over the past 18 months. But here's what made it complicated. Dominic wasn't the architect. Marcus was. She'd found the proof in the notebook, his handwriting, confirmed by comparing it to internal memos. Marcus had been systematically diverting funds, using his access to Dominic's accounts and signature authority to approve transfers that never went through proper channels. The compliance reports that kept getting ignored, Marcus was intercepting them before they reached Dominic. The suspicious meetings, Marcus was hosting them while Dominic was traveling. It was elegant, really. Marcus had positioned himself as indispensable, the loyal assistant who handled all the tedious details so his boss could focus on strategy. And under that cover, he'd been stealing millions. Arya sat in her basement room, staring at the evidence on her laptop screen. She should have felt victorious. She'd solved the puzzle, identified the threat, protected her company. Instead, she felt something uncomfortably close to sympathy. Because Dominic Varelli had no idea. He trusted Marcus completely, relied on him for everything. When this came out, it would destroy more than just business relationships. It would shatter Dominic's ability to trust anyone. Arya knew that feeling. She'd been betrayed by people she loved before. But sentiment couldn't change facts. Marcus was stealing, and if Arya didn't stop it, her own company would be caught in the blast radius when federal investigators eventually figured out what was happening. She had 10 days until the gala. 10 days to decide exactly how to handle this. 10 days until Lena Varelli's attempt at humiliation became the perfect stage for something much bigger. Emma, I need to talk to you. Julian Reeves cornered her in the hallway 3 days before the gala. He'd been increasingly persistent over the past weeks, always finding excuses to chat, to touch her arm, to stand too close. Yes, sir? This gala thing. He leaned against the wall, casual. You're working it, right? Coat check, sir. That's a waste. You should be a guest. His smile was warm, inviting. You clean up nice, I can tell. Arya kept her expression neutral. That's kind of you, but I'm just staff. Just staff, he repeated. You know what I think? I think you're playing a role. I think there's more to you than you let on. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. He stepped closer. I've been watching you. You're too smart for this job. Too observant. You notice things other people miss. He tilted his head. What are you really doing here, Emma? It was a test. He didn't actually know anything. He was fishing, reading her reactions. Arya let her shoulders slump slightly, introduced a tremor to her voice. I'm just trying to keep my job, sir. Please don't make trouble for me. The change in his expression was immediate. He bought it completely, stepping back. Hey, no, I'm not trying to scare you. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm around, okay? Thank you, sir. After he left, Arya let out a slow breath. That had been close. too close. 3 more days. She just needed 3 more days. The night before the gala, Lena summoned Arya to her bedroom. "I have a surprise for you," she said, her smile sharp. "For tomorrow night." Arya waited, silent. "You're not working coat check anymore. I have something better planned." Lena pulled out a garment bag, unzipping it with theatrical flair. "You're going to be a guest." The dress inside was beautiful, a deep green silk that would photograph gorgeously. But Arya could see the trap immediately. The dress was high-end, but not quite right, something that would scream trying too hard to the society crowd. And Lena's smile had too many teeth. "Ma'am, I couldn't. I insist." Lena's voice went hard. "See, I've been thinking about what you said, about knowing your place, and I realized maybe I've been too harsh. Maybe you deserve a chance to see how the other half lives, just for one night." It was a setup. Lena was going to parade her in front of high society, let everyone see the maid playing dress-up, then publicly reveal who she really was. Maximum humiliation. Perfect. "That's very generous, ma'am," Arya said quietly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Lena's smile widened. "Just be ready at 7 tomorrow. And Emma? Wear your hair down. You have pretty hair when it's not hidden under that awful cap." After she left, Arya returned to her room and made a phone call. "Simone, I need you to courier something to the estate tomorrow, and I need you to be ready for a show." "What kind of show?" Arya smiled, sharp and cold. "The kind that ends with someone losing everything." The day of the gala arrived with crystalline clarity. Arya woke before dawn, running through her plan one final time. She'd made copies of everything. The notebook photographs, the financial records, witness statements from staff members about Marcus's suspicious activities. One set was with Simone. Another was in a safety deposit box. A third was queued to send to the SEC. If Arya didn't check in by midnight, she wasn't taking any chances. The household was chaos. Caterers arrived at 6, transforming the ballroom into something out of a fairy tale. Flowers everywhere, chandeliers gleaming, tables set with crystal and gold. Rosa directed traffic with military precision while Gregory handled the outdoor lighting and parking arrangements. Arya stayed out of the way, running errands and making herself useful. At 4, Simone's courier arrived with a package addressed to Emma Cooper. Arya signed for it, carried it to her room, and locked the door. Inside was a dress that cost more than most people's cars. Custom made, perfectly fitted, in a deep midnight blue that would make cameras weep. She'd ordered it weeks ago, before she even knew about the gala, because Arya Cole didn't do anything halfway. If Lena wanted to put her on display, Arya would give her a show she'd never forget. At 6:30, Arya began her transformation. She showered, taking her time, applied makeup with the skill of someone who'd attended enough high society events to know exactly how to work a room. Dried and styled her hair, not the messy bun of a maid, but the sleek waves of someone who belonged. Then the dress. It fit like it had been made for her, because it had. The fabric moved like water, catching light in ways that made it impossible to look away. She added jewelry, simple, expensive, shoes that cost 4 months of Emma Cooper's salary. Finally, she looked in the mirror. Emma Cooper was gone. In her place stood Arya Cole, billionaire CEO, ready for war. The ballroom was filling when Arya made her entrance at 7:15. She'd timed it deliberately, late enough that most guests had arrived, early enough that dinner hadn't started. Conversations died as she walked in. Lena spotted her immediately, and for one beautiful second, her face showed pure shock. This wasn't the trap she'd set. This was something else entirely. Then Lena recovered, her smile turning vicious. She started toward Arya, clearly ready to execute whatever humiliation she'd planned. But Arya was faster. She crossed to the small stage where a microphone waited for Lena's welcoming remarks. She picked it up, and her voice carried across the suddenly silent room. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Arya Cole, and I have a story to tell you." Lena froze. Dominic, who'd been talking to Senator Blake, turned toward the stage. Marcus went pale. Arya smiled, sharp and bright. 3 months ago, I came to this house as a maid. I scrubbed your toilets, washed your sheets, and listened to your conversations. I made myself invisible so I could see the truth." She paused, letting that sink in. And what I found was fascinating. The room was utterly silent now, 200 people holding their breath. "But before I get to the part where I expose financial crimes," Arya continued, her tone conversational, "let's talk about cruelty. See, I was invited here tonight as a joke. Mrs. Varelli thought it would be funny to dress up the help, parade me in front of you all, then reveal that I was just a maid playing pretend. She wanted to humiliate me." Lena's face had gone from shock to rage to something approaching terror. "The thing is," Arya said, "I'm not Emma Cooper. I never was. I'm Arya Cole, CEO of TechCore Industries. Maybe you've heard of us. We're worth about $2.3 billion. I came here investigating a suspicious partnership between my supplier and Varelli Industries." She gestured to the stunned crowd. "And I found something much more interesting than I expected." She pulled out her phone, connected it to the presentation system Gregory had set up for Lena's speeches. Financial records appeared on screens around the room. Marcus Brennan, Dominic Varelli's trusted assistant, has been systematically embezzling from Varelli Industries for 18 months. He's moved over $300 million through a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, using his access to Mr. Varelli's accounts and signature authority to approve fraudulent transfers. Marcus bolted for the door. Gregory and 2 security guards blocked his exit. Dominic stood frozen, his face gray. "I have copies of everything," Arya continued. "The hidden notebook where Marcus tracked his illegal transfers. The compliance reports he intercepted before they could reach Mr. Varelli. Witness statements from staff members about suspicious meetings and irregular behavior. It's all documented, and it's all going to the SEC tomorrow morning." She paused, then looked directly at Lena. "As for you, Mrs. Varelli, you treated me like I was nothing. You enjoyed it. You thought my position gave you the right to be cruel." Arya's smile was cold. "But here's the thing about power. It's not about money or status. It's about character, and you have none." Lena's hands were shaking. The room was still silent, but phones were out now, people recording, texting, calling reporters. Arya returned her attention to the crowd. "I know this isn't the party you expected, but I thought you all deserved to know who you're really doing business with. Senator Blake, that development deal you were discussing with Mr. Varelli. You might want to table it until the SEC investigation is complete. Mrs. Ashford, that charity board you chair? Maybe don't seat Mrs. Varelli on it. She's about to become very unpopular." She set down the microphone, walked off the stage, crossed the ballroom while 200 people watched in stunned silence. At the door, she turned back one last time. "Oh, and Lena, the dress you picked for me? I had it donated to charity. This one's mine." She smiled. "Know your place." Then Arya Cole walked out of the Varelli estate, got into the car Simone had waiting, and didn't look back. Behind her, the gala dissolved into chaos. Reporters would arrive within the hour. The SEC would launch an investigation by Monday, and Lena Varelli's carefully constructed social empire would crumble like sand. But that was their problem now. Arya had work to do. The car smelled like leather and Simone's expensive perfume. Arya watched the Varelli estate shrink in the rearview mirror, her heart still racing from adrenaline. Her hands were steady now, but they'd been shaking when she'd set down that microphone. "That was either brilliant or insane," Simone said from the driver's seat. "I haven't decided which. Both, probably." Arya leaned her head back against the seat. "Did you get it all?" "Every second, live streamed to a private server, just like you asked." Simone glanced at her. "It's already going viral. Someone in that room posted clips to Twitter. You've got hashtags trending." Arya closed her eyes. She'd expected this, planned for it even, but the reality of going public still felt surreal. For 3 months, she'd been invisible. Now she was the center of a story that would dominate business news for weeks. "Nathan's calling," Simone said. "You want to take it?" "Put him on speaker." Nathan Torres sounded like he'd been running a marathon. "Please tell me you didn't just accuse a sitting senator of corruption on camera." "I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I suggested he table a business deal pending investigation." Arya opened her eyes. There's a difference. A difference the senator's lawyers won't appreciate. But Nathan's tone shifted. That said, holy hell, Arya, the board's blowing up my phone. Half of them want to fire you. The other half want to give you a raise. Tell them I'll be in the office Monday morning. We need to prepare for the SEC inquiry. Arya sat up straighter. And Nathan, get our legal team ready. When the feds start digging into Varelli Industries, they're going to look at everyone connected to that Cayman Shell Corp. I want us cooperating fully from day one. Already on it, Simone sent me your documentation an hour ago. He paused. You really spent 3 months as a maid? I really did. That's the most Arya Cole thing I've ever heard. Nathan's laugh was tired but genuine. Get some rest. Monday's going to be a circus. After he hung up, Simone drove in silence for several minutes. Then, you okay? Arya considered the question. Was she okay? She'd just destroyed a woman's social standing, exposed massive fraud, and probably ended Marcus Brennan's freedom. She'd done it all while wearing a dress that cost more than Emma Cooper made in 6 months. Ask me tomorrow, she said finally. They drove through the night, leaving Connecticut behind. The media storm hit before Arya made it back to her penthouse in Manhattan. Her phone started buzzing with calls from reporters, investors, old business school classmates who suddenly remembered they'd been friends. She ignored all of it, letting Nathan and her PR team handle the initial wave. But some calls couldn't be ignored. Ms. Cole, this is Agent Sarah Brenner with the SEC. The woman's voice was crisp, professional. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss the allegations you made tonight regarding Varelli Industries. Arya had been expecting this. I can be available Monday morning. I have extensive documentation prepared. I'd prefer to meet sooner. Tomorrow, if possible. Tomorrow's Sunday. Financial crimes don't take weekends off. Agent Brenner's tone suggested she didn't either. 10 a.m., our Manhattan office, Arya agreed, then spent the next 3 hours organizing her evidence into a presentation that would survive federal scrutiny. She'd been thorough during her investigation, but thoroughness took on new meaning when presenting to the SEC. Simone stayed with her, ordering Chinese food neither of them ate and fact-checking details until her eyes crossed. This Marcus guy, Simone said around midnight, scrolling through the financial records. He was stealing, but he was also covering his tracks really well. Some of these transfers are buried under 3 layers of shell companies. He's smart. That's what makes him dangerous. Arya rubbed her temples. If I hadn't been inside the house, if I hadn't found that notebook, we might never have connected the dots. So what happens to him now? Prison, probably. Wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. Arya's voice was flat. He'll spend the next decade fighting federal charges. Simone was quiet for a moment. You almost sound sorry for him. I'm not, but I understand desperation. Arya thought about Marcus's devotion to Dominic, the way he'd built his entire life around being indispensable. He probably started small. Maybe he borrowed money he intended to pay back. Then it spiraled. That's a generous interpretation. It's a human one. Arya met her friend's eyes. Doesn't mean he doesn't deserve consequences. Just means I recognize the pattern. Because Arya had seen desperation before. She'd lived it. Back when she was 17 and emancipated and building her first startup with maxed out credit cards and a laptop held together with duct tape. She'd made choices that kept her up at night, crossed lines she'd told herself she never would. The difference was she'd never stolen, never lied about who she was. Well, not until 3 months ago, and that had been for different reasons. But she understood the temptation, the voice that whispers, you deserve more, you've earned this, no one will notice. Marcus had listened to that voice, and now he'd pay for it. The SEC meeting was exactly as unpleasant as Arya expected. Agent Brenner brought 3 colleagues, all of whom looked like they'd been pulled away from family dinners and weren't happy about it. They spent 4 hours going through Arya's evidence, asking questions that felt like traps, documenting everything with the kind of precision that made lawyers nervous. Walk me through how you obtained these photographs, Agent Brenner said, studying the images of Marcus's notebook. I was cleaning Mr. Varelli's office. The notebook was in an unlocked drawer. You photographed it without permission. I documented what appeared to be evidence of financial crimes occurring at a company my own business had ties to. Arya kept her voice steady. I acted to protect my company and our shareholders by working undercover as a domestic employee, by gathering information that was otherwise inaccessible. Agent Brenner made a note. Some people might call that corporate espionage. Some people might call it due diligence. Arya leaned forward slightly. Agent Brenner, I'm not here to debate the ethics of my investigation. I'm here to provide evidence of fraud on a massive scale. You can pursue that fraud or you can waste time questioning my methods. Your choice. One of the other agents, a younger man with glasses, actually smiled. Agent Brenner did not. We'll need to interview everyone involved, she said. That includes the Varellis, their staff, and anyone who had knowledge of these transactions. Rosa Martinez, the head housekeeper, can corroborate Marcus's suspicious behavior. Gregory Chen, the estate manager, keeps detailed logs of who visited the property. You'll want to cross-reference those with the dates in the notebook. Arya pulled up a file on her laptop. I've prepared a list of witnesses and their contact information. Agent Brenner took the list, her expression softening fractionally. You've done our job for us. I did my job. You get to do yours. Arya closed her laptop. Anything else? Yes? Don't leave the country. We may have follow-up questions. Arya stood. I'll be in New York all week. Outside the federal building, Simone was waiting with coffee and what looked like genuine relief. How bad? Could have been worse. They're taking it seriously. Arya accepted the coffee gratefully. Brenner's a hard ass, but she's thorough. If there's more buried in Varelli's finances, she'll find it. Speaking of Varelli, Simone pulled out her phone. You've got about 15 interview requests. Everyone from Forbes to Good Morning America wants to know why a billionaire CEO spent 3 months scrubbing toilets. Tell them all no. Even Forbes? Especially Forbes. This isn't about publicity. Arya started walking toward her car. It's about protecting our company and making sure Marcus can't hurt anyone else. And the thing with Lena Varelli, that wasn't about revenge? Arya paused. That was about justice. There's a difference. But even as she said it, she could taste the lie. Because watching Lena's face crumble in front of 200 people had felt good in a way that had nothing to do with justice. The story exploded over the next 48 hours. Business networks ran segments analyzing the Cayman deal. Social media dissected every frame of the gala footage. Opinion pieces debated whether Arya's undercover investigation was brilliant or unethical, with about equal weight on both sides. But the narrative that really caught fire wasn't about corporate fraud. It was about class warfare. A CEO disguising herself as a maid to expose the rich and powerful. A woman who'd scrubbed floors and eaten leftovers while gathering evidence that would topple an empire. The story had everything: wealth, deception, revenge, and a villain so perfectly cartoonish that people couldn't help but love hating her. Lena Varelli became a meme within 24 hours. Her cruelest comments to Arya, pulled from security footage and leaked by someone at the estate, went viral. People made TikToks about knowing your place. Twitter accounts dedicated to chronicling her social downfall gained hundreds of thousands of followers. Arya watched it all from her office, feeling a complicated mix of satisfaction and discomfort. She'd wanted to expose Lena's cruelty, but this felt different. This felt like mob justice, uncontrolled and escalating. You can't control the narrative once it's out there, Nathan said, reading her expression. The internet's going to do what the internet does. She's awful, but she doesn't deserve death threats. No one deserves death threats, but you can't protect her from consequences. Nathan pulled up a news article on his tablet. Besides, she's got bigger problems. 3 of her charity boards asked her to resign. The country club revoked her membership. Her own mother gave an interview saying Lena was always challenging. Arya winced. That's brutal. Oh, so that's what happens when you build your entire identity on social status and then lose it. He paused. You feel bad for her? I feel bad that I don't feel worse. Arya turned away from the window. What's happening with Dominic? Cooperating fully with the SEC, his lawyers put out a statement saying he had no knowledge of Marcus's activities and he's committed to complete transparency. Nathan scrolled through more articles. He also filed for divorce this morning. That surprised Arya. Fast. Apparently it's been coming for a while. Sources close to the family say their marriage was basically over. They were just maintaining appearances. Nathan looked up. You know what's weird? The business community is actually rallying around him. People are saying he's the victim here, that his trusted assistant betrayed him. He is a victim. Marcus stole from him. Sure, but he's also a grown man who built a business empire on aggressive tactics and questionable deals. The fact that everyone's treating him like some innocent bystander is… Nathan shrugged. Interesting. Arya understood what he wasn't saying. Dominic Varelli was getting grace that most people wouldn't, grace that came from being wealthy and white and male. His ignorance was being read as innocence. It wasn't fair, but fairness had never been the point. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor to Arya's office. Her assistant buzzed her around 10, sounding flustered. There's a Dominic Varelli here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Arya's first instinct was to refuse. She'd done what she needed to do. There was no reason to interact with Dominic further. But curiosity won. Send him in. Dominic Varelli looked like hell. Still expensive. You can't turn off that kind of wealth. But tired. Defeated. He'd aged a decade in 3 days. Ms. Cole, thank you for seeing me. He stood in her doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. Mr. Varelli? Arya gestured to a chair. What can I do for you? He sat, then seemed unsure what to do with his hands, finally settled on clasping them in his lap. I wanted to apologize. For what? You didn't know what Marcus was doing. For my wife. For how she treated you. His voice was rough. I've been reading the coverage, watching the footage. The things she said to you were inexcusable. You're not responsible for her behavior. I married her. I brought her into a position of power, and then I ignored how she used it. Dominic met Arya's eyes. I spent so much time building the business, I stopped paying attention to what was happening in my own house. That's on me. Arya studied him, recalibrating. This wasn't what she'd expected. She'd imagined he might be angry, defensive, looking for someone to blame. Instead, he seemed genuinely regretful. Why are you really here? She asked. Because I owe you the truth. Dominic leaned forward slightly. Marcus started working for me 10 years ago. He was brilliant, devoted, made himself indispensable. After my father died 5 years back, I leaned on him even more. He became like family. And he abused that trust. He did. But I made it easy for him. Dominic's jaw tightened. I gave him access to everything and never questioned anything. I wanted to believe I had someone I could rely on completely. That made me blind. Being trusting isn't a character flaw. It is when it costs your company $300 million. He ran a hand through his hair. The SEC is tearing apart every deal I've made in the last 5 years. They're finding more irregularities, more suspicious transfers. Marcus wasn't just stealing from me. He was using my company to launder money for other people. Arya sat back. That was worse than she'd thought. Who? We don't know yet. But Agent Brenner thinks he was working with an organized crime syndicate, using Varelli Industries as a front. Dominic's voice dropped. Everything my father built, everything I thought I was protecting, it's all contaminated now. The pain in his voice was real. Arya recognized it. She'd felt something similar when her first CFO embezzled $2 million during her company's Series A funding round. The betrayal hurt worse than the money. What are you going to do? She asked. Rebuild. Cooperate fully with investigators. Try to salvage what's left. He paused. And I wanted to ask if you'd consider meeting with my legal team. They're trying to track all the fraudulent transactions, and your documentation is the most comprehensive record we have. I already gave everything to the SEC. I know, but you understand the pattern better than anyone. You saw how Marcus operated up close. Dominic's expression was carefully neutral. I'm not asking for favors. I'll pay whatever your consulting rate is. Arya considered. She didn't need his money, but she did have a vested interest in seeing Varelli Industries cleaned up properly. If Marcus had been working with organized crime, those connections could still threaten her supply chain. I'll talk to my legal team, she said finally. If they clear it, I can spare a few hours. Thank you. Dominic stood, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Why did you do it? The undercover work, I mean. You could have hired investigators, filed reports, kept your distance. He tilted his head slightly. Why put yourself through 3 months of that? Arya thought about her answer carefully. She could give him the corporate line about due diligence and protecting her company. She could talk about the limitations of traditional investigations. Instead, she told him the truth. Because I needed to see who you were when no one was watching. Reports tell you what people do. Being in their house tells you who they are. She met his eyes. And I needed to know if you were corrupt or just careless. And what did you decide? That you're neither. You're just human. Arya's voice softened slightly. You trusted the wrong person and you ignored problems that were easier to overlook. That doesn't make you a criminal. It makes you like most people running companies too big to see every corner. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then, for what it's worth, I'm glad it was you who exposed this. If it had to come out, and it did, I'd rather it was someone who actually gave a damn about the truth. After he left, Arya sat alone in her office, processing the conversation. She'd expected to feel vindicated, triumphant even. Instead, she just felt tired. Her phone buzzed. Simone, texting a link to a news article. The headline read, Lena Varelli checks into luxury rehab facility following public scandal. Arya clicked through, skimming the article. According to sources, Lena had suffered a complete breakdown following the gala. She was reportedly at an exclusive facility in Arizona, being treated for anxiety and depression. The article included quotes from Lena's publicist about the toll of public scrutiny and the importance of mental health. It was spin, obviously, but Arya felt something uncomfortable twist in her chest anyway. She'd wanted consequences for Lena's cruelty, but watching someone actually break under the weight of those consequences felt different than she'd imagined. Nathan appeared in her doorway. You see the Lena thing? Just read it. How are you feeling about it? Arya looked at him. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me thinks she earned this. She was awful. Genuinely, deliberately cruel to people who couldn't fight back. She paused. But another part of me wonders if I made it worse. If exposing her the way I did was necessary or just revenge. Can it be both? Both is complicated. Yeah, well, Nathan sat down across from her. You're a complicated person doing complicated things. Welcome to the gray area. The rest of the week passed in a blur of meetings, interviews with federal investigators, and damage control. Arya's board was split between those who thought her undercover investigation was brilliant strategy and those who thought it was a PR nightmare waiting to implode. The optics are problematic, one board member said during an emergency session. You impersonated someone from a lower socioeconomic class. People could see that as mockery. I didn't impersonate anyone. I took a job and did the work. Arya kept her voice level. And the people whose opinions actually matter, the staff at the Varelli estate, know I treated them with respect. Do they? Or are they afraid to say otherwise because you're a billionaire who could ruin their careers? That landed harder than Arya wanted to admit. She'd been careful during her time at the estate, tried to be genuinely kind to Rosa and the other staff. But had they seen Emma Cooper as a colleague or as a rich woman playing dress-up? She didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. After the meeting, she made a decision. Rosa Martinez answered the phone, sounding cautious. Ms. Cole? Rosa, I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to check in. Check in? Rosa's accent thickened with surprise. About what? About everything. How you're doing, whether the investigation is causing problems at the estate, if you're okay. Arya paused. And to apologize if I made things harder for you. Harder? Mija, you did me a favor. Rosa's laugh was startled but genuine. Marcus was making everyone's life hell, always watching, always reporting back to Mr. Varelli about stupid things. We couldn't relax in our own workspace. He was monitoring the staff? Constantly. Anyone who complained about conditions, Anyone who seemed too friendly with each other, he'd find reasons to fire them. Rosa's voice dropped. I kept my head down because I needed this job, but it wasn't a good environment. Arya made a note to include that in her next conversation with the SEC. Marcus's control over the household was another piece of the pattern. How's everyone handling the media attention? She asked. Gregory's loving it. Someone from CNN interviewed him about estate security. He's been insufferable. Rosa's tone was fond. The rest of us are just trying to keep our heads down. Mr. Varelli promised no one would be let go because of the investigation, so that's good. And you? Honestly, how are you doing? Rosa was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you did what you did. Not just the Marcus thing, though that's important, but standing up to Mrs. Varelli. Her voice got fierce. That woman made people feel small for years. It was time someone reminded her she's not special just because she married money. I might have gone overboard. No, you went exactly as far as necessary. Rosa softened. Emma, Arya, whatever I'm supposed to call you. You were kind to me when you didn't have to be. You treated me like a person, not just staff. That matters more than you know. After they hung up, Arya felt something loosen in her chest. She hadn't ruined Rosa's life. She hadn't made everything worse. That was something. The following Monday brought new developments. The SEC announced formal charges against Marcus Brennan for wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. He'd been arrested Sunday night trying to board a flight to Brazil. Agent Brenner called Arya personally to thank her for the documentation. Without your work, he might have gotten away with it. The notebook was particularly valuable. It gave us the timeline we needed to connect his activities to specific transactions. Happy to help. Arya paused. Any progress on the organized crime connections? That's ongoing. But yes, we've identified at least 3 criminal organizations that were using Varelli Industries to launder money. Marcus was taking a cut of everything that moved through. Brenner's tone was grim. This is going to be a massive case. And Dominic Varelli? As far as we can tell, he's clean, negligent, but not criminal. Brenner sighed. Though between you and me, being that negligent when you're running a multi-billion-dollar company should probably be illegal. Arya almost smiled. I'll leave that to Congress. Good luck with that. Brenner paused. Ms. Cole? For what it's worth, what you did took guts. Not everyone would be willing to put themselves in that position for 3 months. I did what I had to do. Maybe, but you did it well. That afternoon, Arya finally agreed to one interview. Not Forbes or the Wall Street Journal, but a smaller outlet that focused on workplace issues and labor rights. The reporter, a woman named Jessica Chen, met her in a coffee shop downtown. Thank you for making time, Jessica said, setting up her recorder. I know everyone wants to talk to you right now. You're the first interview I've accepted. Why me? Because you asked different questions. Arya gestured to Jessica's preliminary email. Everyone else wants to know about the corporate fraud and the dramatic reveal. You asked about what it was like to actually work as a maid. Jessica smiled. That's the story everyone's missing. The business fraud is important, but you spent 3 months living a completely different life. That has to change a person. It did, just not in the ways I expected. Arya thought about how to explain. I went in thinking I'd gather evidence and leave. Clinical, professional, but you can't live that close to people and stay detached. Tell me about the staff. So Arya did. She talked about Rosa's quiet strength, Gregory's military precision, the way the household functioned like a small ecosystem. She talked about eating meals in the staff kitchen, sharing stories and complaints, feeling genuinely welcomed by people who had no idea who she really was. They treated Emma Cooper like family, Arya said. Even though they barely knew her, that generosity stayed with me. And Lena Varelli, Arya chose her words carefully. Lena treated me like I was disposable, like my humanity didn't matter because of my job title. That stayed with me too. Do you think you went too far in exposing her? I think I exposed the truth. What happened afterward, the media pile on, the social exile, that wasn't all my doing. People were ready to turn on her because she'd been cruel for a long time. Arya paused. But do I feel complicated about it? Yes. I can acknowledge that she's suffering real consequences while still believing those consequences are deserved. Jessica made notes. What about Dominic Varelli? There's been some criticism that you were harder on his wife than on him, even though he was the one whose company was being used for crimes. Dominic didn't know. Lena chose to be cruel. Arya met Jessica's eyes. I hold people accountable for their choices, not their ignorance. Some would say being that ignorant when you run a company is itself a choice. You're right, it is. Arya leaned back. And Dominic's facing consequences too. His company's reputation is destroyed, his marriage is over, and he'll spend years rebuilding trust. But those consequences came from Marcus's actions and his own negligence. Lena's consequences came from her deliberate cruelty. There's a difference. Jessica studied her for a moment. You really think about this stuff, don't you? The ethics of what you did. Every day. If I didn't, I'd be no better than the people I exposed. The interview ran 3 days later under the headline, Inside Arya Cole's Undercover Investigation, Justice or Revenge. It was fair, balanced, and asked hard questions Arya appreciated answering. The response was mixed. Some people praised her honesty. Others said she was justifying vigilante justice. A few pointed out that a billionaire CEO cosplaying as a poor person was inherently problematic, regardless of intentions. Arya read every comment, every critique, every defense. She let it sink in, the good and bad, because that was the price of what she'd done. Nathan found her late one night, still in her office, scrolling through social media reactions. You need to stop reading that stuff, he said. Probably. Definitely. He sat down. You did what you thought was right. You exposed fraud and protected our company. The rest is just noise. The noise matters. It tells me how I'm being perceived, what narratives are forming. Arya set down her phone. I need to stay ahead of it. Or you could accept that you can't control everything. Nathan's voice was gentle. You made your choice. Some people will think it was brilliant. Some will think it was wrong. Most will forget about it in 6 months when the next scandal breaks. That's cynical. That's realistic. He stood. Go home. Get some sleep. The world will still be here tomorrow. Arya did go home eventually, to her penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and carefully curated art. She poured herself a drink and stood looking out at the city, thinking about everything that had changed in a week. A month ago, she'd been Emma Cooper, scrubbing floors and swallowing insults. Now she was Arya Cole again, back in her real life. But somehow it felt less real than the basement room at the Varelli estate. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Dominic Varelli. I got your number from Agent Brenner. I wanted to let you know they've recovered most of the stolen funds. Your documentation made it possible to freeze the accounts before Marcus could move the money. Thank you. Arya stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back. I'm glad it helped. Good luck with the rebuild. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. If you ever want to talk about what happened, not as CEO to CEO, just as people who went through something strange, I'm around. No agenda, no business, just coffee. Arya's finger hovered over the keyboard. This was a bad idea. Dominic Varelli represented everything she'd walked away from. Getting involved with him personally would complicate things she'd worked hard to keep simple. But she found herself typing anyway. Maybe. Let me think about it. Because despite everything, despite the fraud and the investigation and the media circus, one truth remained. Dominic Varelli had trusted the wrong person and lost everything. Arya Cole had trusted her instincts and gained a different kind of understanding. Neither of them had emerged unchanged. And maybe that was the point. Arya didn't answer Dominic's text for 3 days. She left it sitting in her messages, unanswered but not deleted, while she threw herself into the controlled chaos of running her company. Board meetings, investor calls, product launches that had been delayed while she was underground at the Varelli estate. The normal rhythm of her life, except nothing felt normal anymore. Thursday afternoon, she finally texted back, Coffee sounds fine, Monday 3 p.m. I'll send you the address. No. She chose a place in Brooklyn, deliberately far from both their usual territories. Neutral ground, the kind of spot where billionaires didn't typically venture, which meant they could have an actual conversation without someone recording it for TikTok. Simone cornered her Friday morning, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression that meant she was about to say something Arya didn't want to hear. "So you're meeting with him? It's just coffee." "Nothing is just coffee when federal investigations are involved." Simone set down both cups. "What are you hoping to get out of this?" Arya considered the question. What did she want? Closure, maybe. Understanding. Or maybe she just wanted to see if the man she'd observed from the shadows matched the one who existed in full light. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "That's not like you. You always know what you want." "Yeah, well." Arya picked up her coffee. "Maybe 3 months of pretending to be someone else scrambled my brain. Or maybe you saw something in him that interests you." Simone's tone was careful. "Just be smart about it. The SEC is still investigating. His company is still toxic. Getting involved with him personally could blow back on you in ways we can't predict." "I know." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're acting like someone who's lonely and looking for connection with the one other person who understands what you just went through." Simone's voice softened. "Which is human, but also dangerous." Arya wanted to argue, but couldn't, because Simone was right. The past 3 months had been isolating in ways Arya hadn't fully processed. She'd been surrounded by people, but utterly alone, unable to be herself with anyone. And now that she was back, that loneliness hadn't disappeared. It had just changed shape. "I'll be careful," she said finally. "You always say that right before you do something reckless." Saturday brought unexpected news. Lena Varelli's lawyer released a statement announcing she was seeking treatment not just for anxiety and depression, but for substance abuse issues that had apparently been ongoing for years. The statement positioned it as a brave choice, a step toward healing, but the subtext was clear. Lena was trying to rewrite herself from villain to victim. The media ate it up. Suddenly, there were think pieces about the pressure of being a society wife, the impossible standards placed on women in elite circles, the way addiction can hide behind wealth and privilege. Lena was being transformed from cruel socialite to tragic figure. Arya read it all with a sick feeling in her stomach. Not because she doubted Lena had problems, addiction was real, and suffering was suffering, but because she recognized the strategy. This was damage control, a PR campaign designed to make people forget the recordings of Lena calling her staff worthless, forgettable, less than human. "She's rewriting history," Nathan said when Arya brought it up. "Trying to make people see her as someone who was suffering instead of someone who made others suffer." Both can be true, sure, but one doesn't erase the other. He pulled up another article. "Look at this. Her publicist is saying the stress of her marriage, the pressure of maintaining appearances, the way her husband was never home, it all contributed to her behavior. Blaming Dominic. Indirectly. It's smart. Actually, she can't attack you directly without looking petty, so she's positioning herself as someone caught between an absent husband and the pressures of their social world. You just happen to be collateral damage." Arya set down her phone. "You know what's messed up? Part of me almost admires the strategy. It's effective. You're allowed to recognize someone's tactical skill while still knowing they're full of it." Nathan leaned back in his chair. "The question is whether you respond or let it play out." "I'm not responding. This isn't about winning a PR war." Arya stood, pacing to the window. "Lena can spin whatever narrative she wants. The facts are on record. The footage exists. People who worked for her know the truth. And if the narrative shifts anyway, if public opinion decides you were too hard on a woman who was struggling, then that's what happens." Arya turned back. "I can't control how people interpret my actions. I can only control whether those actions were right." Nathan studied her. "You've changed since this whole thing started. How? You used to care more about winning. Now you care more about being right." He smiled slightly. "It's a good look on you." Sunday evening, Arya got a call from Rosa. She almost didn't answer. There was no reason for Rosa to be calling unless something was wrong, but curiosity won. "Miss Cole, I'm sorry to bother you." "You're not bothering me. What's going on?" Rosa's voice was tight. "Mrs. Varelli's lawyers contacted several of us on staff. They're asking us to sign statements saying she was always kind, that the media has exaggerated how she treated people." Arya's jaw clenched. "Are they offering money?" "Oh, $5,000 each. More if we're willing to do video interviews."
Rosa sounded disgusted. They want us to lie. You don't have to sign anything. That kind of witness tampering could get her lawyers in trouble. I know, I'm not going to do it. Rosa paused. But some of the younger staff are considering it. $5,000 is a lot of money when you're making minimum wage. Arya understood the calculation. She'd made similar ones herself,
Back when she was building her first company on nothing but credit card debt and determination. Sometimes survival meant compromising your principles. Tell anyone who's considering it to call me first, Arya said. I can't tell them what to do, but I can make sure they understand the risks. Thank you. And Ms. Cole, I just want you to know that what you did, exposing everything, it mattered. Not just the fraud stuff, but showing people how she really treated us. Rosa's voice got fierce again. We've been invisible for so long. You made us visible. After they hung up, Arya sat with that. She'd gone into the Varelli estate thinking about corporate espionage and financial crimes. She'd come out having accidentally started a conversation about class and dignity and who gets to be treated as human. She wasn't sure she'd wanted that kind of visibility, but maybe it was necessary anyway. Monday arrived too fast. Arya dressed carefully, expensive but understated, the kind of outfit that said she wasn't trying to impress anyone but knew her worth. She took a car service to Brooklyn, arriving at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. Dominic was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He'd dressed down too, jeans and a sweater instead of the suit she'd seen him wear at the estate. He looked tired but present, like he'd actually slept for the first time in weeks. I ordered you a latte, he said as she sat. If that's wrong, I can get something else. Latte's fine. Arya wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for something to do with them. Thanks for meeting me here. I know it's out of the way. I appreciate the discretion. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I've had enough reporters following me around. They sat in silence for a moment, the awkwardness of 2 people who'd technically never met but knew too much about each other anyway. This is weird, right? Dominic said finally. You spent 3 months in my house and we barely spoke. Now we're having coffee like old friends. We're not friends. No, but we're not strangers either. He took a sip of his coffee. You saw things about my life that I didn't even see. That creates a strange kind of intimacy. Arya couldn't argue with that. She had seen him, really seen him, in ways most people never would. She'd watched him at breakfast, distracted and distant. She'd seen the way he moved through his house like a guest in his own life. She'd observed his kindness toward staff and his blindness to his wife's cruelty. Why did you want to meet? She asked. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Dominic set down his cup. Part of me wanted to thank you properly. Another part wanted to understand why you did what you did. And maybe a part of me just wanted to talk to someone who gets it. Gets what? What it's like to have your life implode because you trusted the wrong person. His voice went quiet. Everyone keeps telling me it's not my fault, that Marcus deceived me, that I'm a victim. But I don't feel like a victim. I feel like an idiot who was too busy to notice his entire world was falling apart. Arya understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. You're not an idiot. You're human. Humans trust people. Even when we shouldn't, especially then. She met his eyes. The alternative is trusting no one and being alone. That's not better. Dominic was quiet for a moment, studying her. You've been betrayed before. It wasn't a question. Arya considered deflecting, keeping the conversation focused on him. But something about this moment, the neutral coffee shop, the afternoon light, the fact that he'd already seen her at her lowest, made her want to be honest. My first CFO embezzled $2 million during our Series A funding round. I'd hired him based on a recommendation from a mentor I trusted. He seemed brilliant, dedicated. She traced the rim of her cup. Turned out he was also a gambling addict who saw my company as his personal ATM. What happened to him? Prison. But not before he almost destroyed everything I'd built. Arya's voice hardened. I spent 6 months putting out fires, reassuring investors, rebuilding systems. It taught me that trust is a luxury I couldn't afford. Is that why you went undercover? Because you couldn't trust anyone else to get the truth? Partly. But also because I needed to see for myself. She paused. Reports can be falsified. Investigators can miss things. But if you're standing in someone's kitchen at 6 in the morning watching how they treat the person pouring their coffee, you learn who they really are. And what did you learn about me? The question hung between them, loaded with more weight than it should carry. Arya chose her words carefully. That you're not a bad person, just a distracted one. She softened slightly. You built an empire and then stopped paying attention to what was happening inside it. That's not evil. It's just human negligence. That's generous. It's honest. Arya leaned forward. You want to know what really struck me? When you apologized about Lena. You were the only person in that house who seemed to notice she was cruel and actually cared about it. Dominic's expression darkened. I should have done more than notice. I should have stopped her. You can't control another person's behavior. I could have left. Filed for divorce years ago when it became clear we wanted different things. He ran a hand through his hair. But it was easier to stay, to bury myself in work and pretend everything was fine. That's on me. Why did you marry her? The question was too personal, too direct. Arya regretted it immediately, but Dominic answered anyway. Because I was 35 and building a business, and my father kept saying I needed a wife who understood our world. Lena was beautiful, connected, knew how to work a room. He smiled bitterly. And I was too young and stupid to realize that none of that matters if you don't actually like the person. You didn't like her? I didn't know her. Still don't. Really? Dominic stared into his coffee. We were married for 6 years and I couldn't tell you her favorite color or what she dreams about. That's not a marriage. That's a business arrangement that happened to involve a wedding. Arya felt a pang of sympathy despite herself. She'd been so focused on Lena's cruelty and Dominic's negligence that she hadn't considered the loneliness of their arrangement. Two people living parallel lives under the same roof, neither one truly seeing the other. The divorce proceedings started last week, Dominic continued. Her lawyers are asking for half of everything, claiming she contributed to my success through social connections and reputation management. Did she? Maybe. I honestly don't know. He looked up. What I do know is that I want it over. I'll give her whatever she wants if it means I can move on. That's a lot of money to give away out of guilt. It's not guilt. It's the price of freedom. Dominic's voice was firm. I spent 6 years in a marriage that made me miserable. I'm not spending another 6 months fighting about assets. They fell into silence again, but it felt different now. Less awkward, more contemplative, like they were two people who'd survived adjacent disasters and were trying to figure out what came next. Can I ask you something? Dominic said finally. You can ask. Do you regret it? The undercover work, the public exposure, all of it. Arya considered the question honestly. Did she regret it? She'd achieved her goal, protected her company, exposed fraud, gathered evidence that would prevent Marcus from hurting anyone else. But the cost had been higher than she'd anticipated. The media scrutiny, the ethical debates, the way people now looked at her and saw either a hero or a villain with nothing in between. I regret how it affected people who didn't deserve it, she said slowly. Rosa and the other staff got dragged into a media circus they never asked for. Lena's facing consequences I wanted her to face, but watching her actually break under them feels different than I expected. And me? Do you regret how it affected me? No. Arya met his eyes. You needed to know the truth about Marcus. The fact that it came from me instead of federal investigators doesn't change that. Dominic nodded slowly. That's fair, and for what it's worth, I'm glad it was you. At least you gave a damn about getting it right. They talked for another hour, the conversation drifting from business to personal and back again. Dominic told her about rebuilding Virelli Industries, the companies that had pulled contracts and the ones that had stayed loyal. Arya talked about the board's reaction to her investigation, the investors who thought she was brilliant and the ones who thought she was reckless. It felt normal in a way nothing had felt normal in months. Two people talking honestly about complicated situations without agenda or performance. Arya found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did, letting her guard down incrementally. I should go, she said finally, checking her watch. I have a dinner meeting at 6. Right, of course. Dominic stood when she did. Thank you for this. For meeting me, I mean. I know you didn't have to. I wanted to. And Arya was surprised to realize it was true.
They walked outside together, the Brooklyn street busy with evening commuters and students heading to nearby bars.
Dominic's car was parked down the block, but he hesitated before leaving. "Can I ask you one more thing?" Arya waited. "When you were at the estate working as Emma, were there moments when you forgot who you really were? When you felt like maybe Emma Cooper was more real than Arya Cole?" The question landed with unexpected weight, because yes, there had been moments. Eating breakfast with Rosa and laughing at her stories, folding laundry while the radio played in the background. Small, simple moments where Arya had felt more grounded than she ever did in boardrooms or investor meetings. Sometimes, she admitted, Emma's life was smaller, but it was also simpler. She didn't have to think about quarterly earnings or hostile takeovers. She just had to show up and do the work. Do you miss it? I miss parts of it, the clarity maybe, knowing exactly what was expected and being able to deliver it. Arya pulled her coat tighter. But I don't miss the powerlessness. Emma had to swallow every insult, accept every cruelty. Arya can fight back. Is that what you did at the gala? Fought back? I exposed the truth. Whether that's fighting back or something else, I'll let history decide. Dominic smiled. I think history's going to be arguing about you for a while. After he left, Arya stood on the Brooklyn street corner feeling unbalanced. The conversation had been easier than expected, more genuine. Dominic Varelli wasn't the distant figurehead she'd observed from the shadows. He was just a man trying to rebuild after betrayal, same as anyone else. That should have made things simpler. Instead, it made everything more complicated. The dinner meeting was with potential investors interested in TechCore's expansion into sustainable manufacturing. Arya presented her pitch with practiced polish, answered questions about margins and market share, did everything expected of a CEO courting serious money. But her mind kept drifting back to the coffee shop, to Dominic's question about whether she'd regretted any of it. She'd given him an answer, but she wasn't sure it was the whole truth, because the real answer was messier. She didn't regret exposing Marcus or protecting her company. She didn't even regret the public confrontation with Lena, though the aftermath sat heavier than expected. What she regretted was how easy it had been to become someone else, how naturally Emma Cooper had emerged, complete with mannerisms and speech patterns Arya hadn't consciously chosen. 3 months wasn't long, but it had been long enough to wonder which version of herself was the performance, the billionaire CEO or the quiet maid who just wanted to do her job and be left alone. "You're distracted," one of the investors said, pulling her back to the present. "Everything okay?" "Fine. Sorry. Long week." Arya refocused, closing the deal with the efficiency that had built her empire. But the question lingered. Wednesday brought another complication. Arya's PR team forwarded her a request from a documentary crew working on a film about corporate fraud and whistleblowing. They wanted to interview her, include footage from the gala, maybe even recreate some of her time undercover. "Absolutely not," Arya said immediately. Her head of PR, a sharp woman named Michelle, raised an eyebrow. "It's the Times. They're positioning it as serious journalism, not tabloid entertainment. I don't care who's making it. I'm not turning 3 months of my life into content." Arya pushed the proposal across her desk. Declined politely. "They're going to make it with or without you. At least if you participate, you can control the narrative." "There's no narrative to control. I did what I did. People can interpret it however they want." Arya stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Send a polite number." After Michelle left, Simone appeared in the doorway. "You know she's right. If you don't tell your story, someone else will." "Let them." Arya returned to her laptop. "I'm not interested in being a character in someone's morality play." "Too late. You already are." Simone sat down uninvited. "The question is whether you want any say in how that character is portrayed. The work speaks for itself." Does it? Because from where I'm sitting, the conversation has moved beyond corporate fraud. People are debating class warfare, undercover journalism, whether rich people can ever really understand poverty. Simone leaned forward. "You started something bigger than you intended. Ignoring it won't make it go away." Arya wanted to argue, but couldn't. The think pieces kept coming, each one dissecting her choices from a different angle. Liberal outlets praised her for exposing inequality. Conservative ones accused her of class tourism. Labor activists celebrated her solidarity with workers. Business journals questioned her ethics. Everyone had an opinion about what she'd done and what it meant. No one seemed interested in asking what it had cost. That night, Arya did something she hadn't done in weeks. She pulled up the security footage from the Virelli estate that Simone had saved, the raw recordings from her 3 months as Emma Cooper. She watched herself scrub floors, change sheets, move through the mansion with careful invisibility. She watched Lena's casual cruelty, the way she'd speak to Arya without really seeing her. She watched Dominic pass her in hallways, distracted and distant. And she watched the moments no one else had seen. Rosa teaching her how to properly fold fitted sheets. Gregory letting her take a break when she was obviously exhausted. The small kindnesses that had made those 3 months bearable. Emma Cooper had been real to those people. They treated her with dignity and warmth, not because of who she was, but because that's how they treated everyone. Arya paused the footage on a frame of herself laughing at something Rosa had said, her face open and unguarded in a way Arya Cole's face rarely was. That version of herself looked younger, lighter, less burdened by the weight of running an empire. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dominic. I know you said you'd think about staying in touch. I'm thinking about it too. Whatever you decide, I wanted you to know talking with you helped. So thanks. Arya stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed, Same. Let's do it again sometime. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'd like that. She set down her phone and returned to the footage, watching Emma Cooper move through a life that no longer existed, in a house she'd never returned to, among people who'd thought they knew her but hadn't known her at all. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd gone undercover to expose other people's lies and ended up confronting her own, about who she was, who she wanted to be, and whether the difference between the two even mattered anymore. Friday afternoon, Agent Brenner called with an update. Marcus Brennan had agreed to a plea deal in exchange for testimony about the organized crime connections. He'd face 20 years instead of life, provided he cooperated fully. We're going to take down the entire network, Brenner said, satisfaction clear in her voice. Your documentation gave us the foundation. Marcus's testimony will finish it. That's good. It's more than good. This is going to be one of the biggest white-collar crime cases in years. Brenner paused. You should be proud. I'm just glad it worked. Ms. Cole, can I ask you something off the record? Arya tensed. Okay. Was it worth it? 3 months of your life, the media circus, all of it. Looking back, was it worth what it cost? The same question everyone kept asking in different forms. Arya was getting tired of not having a clean answer. Ask me in a year, she said finally. Right now I'm too close to know. Brenner laughed. Fair enough. Good luck with everything. After she hung up, Arya sat in her office watching the city move beneath her windows. 14 floors up, insulated from the noise and chaos, looking down at lives she'd once pretended to live. Her assistant knocked, poking her head in. Your 4 o'clock is here. Who's my 4 o'clock? Dominic Virelli. He said you'd know what it was about. Arya hadn't known he was coming, but she found herself smiling anyway. Send him in. Dominic entered looking slightly sheepish. I know I should have called first, but I was in the neighborhood and thought maybe we could grab an early dinner. You were in the neighborhood of my office building? Okay, I drove 40 minutes to be in the neighborhood. He smiled. Can you blame me for wanting to skip the part where we pretend this is casual? Arya laughed despite herself. Give me 10 minutes to wrap up. They ended up at a small Italian place in the West Village, the kind of restaurant where the owner knew everyone's order and the wine list was written in marker on a chalkboard. Dominic ordered for both of them after checking what she didn't eat, and they fell into conversation as easily as they had at the coffee shop. How's the rebuild going? Arya asked. Slowly. We've lost about 30% of our client base. The ones who stayed are being cautious, waiting to see if more scandals emerge. Dominic poured them both wine. But we're stabilizing. I brought in a new CFO, completely restructured oversight, fired anyone who should have caught what Marcus was doing. How many people was that? More than I wanted to admit. Turns out when you create a culture where no one questions the boss's right-hand man, you end up with a lot of people willing to look the other way. He took a sip of wine. I'm trying to fix that. Make it safe for people to raise concerns. That's harder than it sounds. Everything's harder than it sounds. He smiled tiredly. What about you? How's life as the CEO who went undercover? Complicated. The board's still divided on whether I'm a genius or a liability. Investors keep asking if I'm planning any more secret investigations. Arya broke off a piece of bread. And I can't go anywhere without someone recognizing me and having opinions about what I did. Do the opinions bother you? Not the criticism. I expected that. She paused. It's the praise that feels weird. People treating me like some kind of hero for working a minimum wage job for 3 months. That's not heroic. That's just Tuesday for millions of people. But you didn't have to do it. You chose to put yourself in that position when you could have stayed comfortable. Dominic met her eyes. That means something. Does it? Or does it just mean I have enough privilege to cosplay as poor without real consequences? I think you're being too hard on yourself. Someone has to be. Arya smiled without humor. Everyone else is either calling me a hero or a villain. I need at least one person willing to acknowledge I'm just a person who made complicated choices. Fine. You're a person who made complicated choices. Dominic raised his glass. To complicated people making complicated choices. Arya clinked her glass against his, feeling something shift between them. This wasn't just coffee anymore. This was becoming something else. Something neither of them had planned, but both seemed willing to explore. They talked through dinner and dessert, the conversation flowing between business and personal with increasing ease. Dominic told her about his father, the impossible standards and casual cruelty that had shaped his childhood. Arya talked about foster care, the instability and hunger that had taught her to trust only herself. We're both products of broken systems, Dominic said as they walked out into the cool evening air. Just different kinds of broken. Is that supposed to be comforting? I don't know, maybe? He smiled. I'm not great at this. At what? Whatever this is. He gestured between them. Making friends, I guess. Or whatever we're doing. Arya stopped walking. What are we doing? Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Honestly, I have no idea. But I know I haven't felt this normal around another person in years. So whatever it is, I don't want to stop. The honesty landed harder than any calculated line could have. Arya found herself nodding. Yeah, same. They stood on the sidewalk while the city moved around them. Two people who'd met under the strangest circumstances trying to figure out if there was anything real beneath the wreckage. I should go, Arya said finally. Early meeting tomorrow. Right. Of course. Dominic hesitated, then, can I call you? Actually call, not just text. Yeah, I'd like that. Walking back to her car, Arya felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not happiness exactly, but possibility. The sense that maybe, despite everything, something good could emerge from the chaos she'd created. Her phone buzzed. Nathan texting, just saw photos of you and Dominic Varelli having dinner. Please tell me you know what you're doing. Arya typed back. Absolutely not, but I'm doing it anyway. Because sometimes the only way forward was through the complicated mess, past the clean narratives and careful strategies, into the uncertain territory where people were just people trying to figure it out. And for the first time in a long time, Arya was willing to try. The photograph showed up online within 12 hours. Arya and Dominic at the Italian restaurant, laughing over wine. Walking down the street, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Nothing scandalous, but intimate enough to fuel speculation. The headlines wrote themselves. Billionaire CEO cozies up to man she exposed. From undercover maid to romantic interest, the Arya Cole story takes another turn. Varelli and Cole, power couple or PR disaster? Arya's PR team went into crisis mode. Michelle showed up at her office Tuesday morning with a stack of printouts and an expression that said she'd stopped being surprised by anything weeks ago. We need to address this, Michelle said, spreading the photos across Arya's desk. Address what? Two people having dinner? Two people whose entire relationship is built on corporate espionage and public scandal, having dinner while federal investigations are ongoing. Michelle tapped one of the photos. This looks bad, Arya.
Like you were using the investigation to get close to him. Like maybe the whole thing was personal from the start. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because from the outside, this narrative makes sense. Rich woman develops obsession with rich man, infiltrates his life, destroys his marriage, then sweeps in to pick up the pieces. Michelle's voice was flat. I'm not saying that's what happened.
I'm saying that's what people will think happened. Arya felt her jaw tighten. She'd anticipated criticism for the investigation itself, but this angle caught her off guard. The idea that her 3 months of work could be reduced to some kind of elaborate romantic scheme made her want to throw something. So what do you suggest? Stop seeing him, publicly, at least until the SEC investigation closes and the media moves on to the next scandal. Michelle gathered the photos. Or date him openly and own the narrative. But this middle ground where you're just friends having intimate dinners is killing us. After Michelle left, Arya sat alone in her office, staring at the photos. They looked happy. That was the problem. Two people who'd been through hell finding something like peace in each other's company. The cameras had caught something real, which made it that much more vulnerable to being twisted into something ugly. Her phone rang. Dominic. I saw the photos, he said without preamble. Yeah, me too. I'm sorry, I should have been more careful about where we went. It's not your fault. We weren't doing anything wrong. Arya paused. But my PR team thinks we should stop seeing each other, at least publicly. The silence on the other end lasted too long. When Dominic spoke again, his voice was careful. What do you think? Arya closed her eyes. What did she think? That she'd just found someone who understood what she'd been through, who didn't need the full backstory because he'd lived adjacent to it. That walking away from that felt like letting the media dictate her personal life. But also that Michelle wasn't wrong about the optics, about how this could undermine everything she'd worked for. I think it's complicated, she said finally. Everything about this is complicated. Dominic's laugh was tired. Look, I don't want to make things harder for you. If you need space, I understand. I don't want space, but I also don't want to give people ammunition to dismiss the investigation as some kind of romantic revenge plot. So we're stuck. Seems like it. They ended the call without resolution, both of them trapped between what they wanted and what the situation allowed. Arya spent the rest of the day in meetings, trying to focus on quarterly projections and product development while her mind kept drifting back to the Italian restaurant, to Dominic's honesty and the way he'd looked at her like she was just a person instead of a headline. Wednesday brought worse news. Lena's lawyer held a press conference announcing that Lena was filing a lawsuit against Arya for invasion of privacy, emotional distress, and defamation. The suit claimed Arya had deliberately infiltrated the Virelli household with the intent to destroy Lena's reputation, that the undercover investigation was a personal vendetta disguised as corporate due diligence. They're asking for $50 million in damages, Simone said, her voice tight with anger, plus a public apology and retraction of any statements you made about her behavior. Arya read through the complaint, her stomach sinking with each page. Lena's lawyers had done their homework. They'd found every interview, every quote, every piece of footage that could be interpreted as Arya attacking Lena personally rather than exposing legitimate wrongdoing. Can they win? Arya asked. Probably not. Truth is a defense against defamation, and everything you said about her is on camera. Simone set down her copy of the complaint. But they don't need to win. They just need to drag this out, make you spend money on lawyers, keep the story in the news cycle. So it's a PR move disguised as a lawsuit. Exactly. Lena's trying to rewrite herself as the victim. You're the big bad billionaire who destroyed her life for fun. Simone's expression was grim. And people are going to eat it up because everyone loves a comeback story. Arya wanted to argue, but she'd seen the shift happening already. The think pieces were getting more sympathetic to Lena, more critical of Arya's methods. The narrative was changing from cruel socialite gets exposed to troubled woman gets publicly humiliated by someone with unlimited resources. We fight it, Arya said. File a motion to dismiss, expose it for what it is. That keeps you in the news. Keeps the story alive. Simone leaned forward. Or you could settle quietly. Give her some money. Sign an NDA. Make it go away. Absolutely not.
That's basically admitting I did something wrong. You did do something wrong, Arya. Maybe not legally, but ethically. Simone's voice was gentle but firm. You went into her house under false pretenses. You recorded her without consent. You exposed her at her own party in front of everyone she knew. Those things might have been justified.
But they weren't innocent. The words landed hard because Arya knew they were true. She'd been so focused on the rightness of exposing fraud and cruelty that she hadn't fully reckoned with the methods she'd used, the lies she'd told, the trust she'd violated, the spectacle she'd created. I'm not settling, she said finally. Whatever happens, we fight. Simone nodded, unsurprised. Then we fight. But Arya, this is going to get ugly. Lena's going to dig up everything she can find about you. Your past, your relationships, every questionable business decision. You need to be ready for that. I'm ready. But she wasn't sure that was true. The lawsuit dominated the news cycle for the rest of the week. Legal analysts debated the merits on cable news. Social media split into camps, some supporting Arya's right to investigate fraud, others condemning her tactics as unethical and cruel. The conversation grew increasingly polarized, with nuance dying in favor of hot takes and performative outrage. Arya tried to ignore it, focusing on work and the million details that running a company required. But it was impossible to escape completely. Her mentions were flooded with opinions, her office voicemail full of messages from reporters wanting comment. Even walking down the street meant risking someone yelling either support or condemnation. Thursday afternoon, Rosa called again. Ms. Cole, I'm so sorry to bother you again.
You're not bothering me. What's going on? Mrs. Varelli's lawyers came to the estate. They're interviewing staff, asking questions about you, about how you acted, what you said, whether you seemed like you were gathering evidence or just working. Rosa's voice dropped. They're trying to build a case that you were always planning to humiliate her. Arya's chest tightened. What did you tell them? The truth. That you worked hard, kept to yourself, treated everyone with respect. Rosa paused. But Miss Cole, some of the other staff, they're saying different things, that you asked a lot of questions, that you were always watching. They're making it sound suspicious. I understand. People interpret things differently. It's not interpretation. Some of them are lying because Mrs. Varelli's lawyers are paying them. Rosa sounded angry now. $5,000 to say you were sneaky. $10,000 to say you seemed like you were spying. They're buying testimony. Arya closed her eyes. Of course they were. This was how it worked when you had money and lawyers and a willingness to bend the truth. You found people desperate enough to need the cash, and you gave them a script that served your narrative. Rosa, I appreciate you telling me this, but you don't have to protect me. If they offer you money, I don't want their money. Rosa's voice was fierce. I know who you are. I know what you did and why you did it. I'm not going to lie for them. Thank you. That means more than you know. After hanging up, Arya forwarded the information to her legal team. They'd need to prepare for bought testimony, for staff members who'd suddenly remember Arya acting suspicious or asking leading questions. The truth would get muddy, filtered through people's financial needs and Lena's lawyers' careful coaching. Friday brought an unexpected ally. Julian Reeves, Lena's younger brother, gave an interview to a major news outlet. Instead of defending his sister, he spoke honestly about her behavior. Lena's always been cruel, he said on camera, looking uncomfortable but determined. She's my sister, and I love her, but I'm not going to pretend she's someone she isn't. The way she treated staff, the things she'd say when she thought no one important was listening, it was bad. Really bad. The interviewer pressed him. Are you saying Arya Cole was justified in exposing her? I'm saying my sister built her identity on making other people feel small. Someone was going to call her on it eventually. Julian shifted in his seat. I don't know if the way Ms. Cole did it was right, but the things she exposed were true. That matters. Arya watched the interview 3 times, surprised by Julian's willingness to break ranks with his family. She remembered him from the estate, the way he'd tried to flirt with her, his bored charm and easy confidence. This version of Julian seemed different, older somehow, like he'd been waiting for permission to tell the truth and finally found it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. Did you see Julian's interview?
Just watched it. He called me afterward, said he couldn't stay silent anymore, that what Lena's doing to you is wrong. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. He also said we should stop hiding and just be honest about whatever this is between us. Arya stared at the message, her heart beating faster. And what is this between us? The response took longer this time. I don't know yet, but I want to find out, and I'm tired of letting other people's opinions dictate my choices. Before she could overthink it, Arya typed, Dinner tomorrow? Somewhere public this time. No hiding. Are you sure? No, but let's do it anyway. They chose a restaurant in Manhattan, the kind of place where celebrities ate and photographers waited outside. Arya wore a dress that photographed well, her armor for stepping into the spotlight deliberately instead of being caught unaware. Dominic met her at the entrance, looking nervous in a way that made him more human. Last chance to back out. I don't back out. Arya took his arm. Let's give them something to talk about. The cameras started flashing immediately. They walked inside together, and Arya felt the entire restaurant turn to watch. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Phones came out. Within minutes, she knew, photos would be everywhere. I forgot what it's like to be the center of attention, Dominic murmured as they were seated. You own $1 billion company. You're always the center of attention. Not like this. This is different. He opened his menu, not really looking at it. Are you okay? Arya considered the question. Was she okay? She was sitting across from a man whose house she'd infiltrated, whose life she'd helped destroy, having dinner in full view of the world while his ex-wife sued her for $50 million. By any reasonable standard, she should not be okay. I'm good, she said, surprised to find it was true. They ordered wine and appetizers, falling into conversation more easily than the setting should allow. Dominic told her about a new project Virelli Industries was pursuing, something in sustainable construction that actually excited him. Arya talked about TechCore's expansion plans, the manufacturing facilities they were building in the Midwest. It felt normal. That was the strange part. Despite everything, despite the cameras and the lawsuits and the media circus, sitting across from Dominic felt like the most normal thing Arya had done in months. Can I ask you something? Dominic said as their entrees arrived. Always with the asking permission. Just ask. What do you want from this? From us, I mean. He met her eyes. Because I need to know if we're doing this for real, or if I'm just the guy who makes you feel less alone after everything that happened. The honesty was brutal and necessary. Arya set down her fork, taking a moment to formulate an answer that wasn't deflection. I don't know what I want, she admitted. I know I like talking to you. I know you're the only person who actually understands what the past few months have been like. I know that when I'm with you, I don't have to perform or explain or justify myself. That's not nothing. No, but it's also not everything. Arya leaned forward. I need to know you're not here because you feel grateful I exposed Marcus, or because you're trying to prove something to yourself about moving on from Lena. Fair. Dominic was quiet for a moment. I'm here because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be interested in another person. Not their connections or their usefulness, just them. He smiled slightly. That's new for me. Or maybe it's old and I forgot. Either way, I don't want to lose it. Even though being with me comes with all this? Arya gestured vaguely at the restaurant, the watching eyes, the phones recording their conversation. Especially because of all this. You're not hiding from it. You're walking straight into the mess and daring anyone to question you. Dominic's expression softened. That's attractive as hell, if I'm being honest. Arya felt herself smile despite everything. You know this is going to make the lawsuit worse. Lena's lawyers will say we were involved all along, that the whole investigation was personal. Let them. We know the truth. The truth doesn't always win. Maybe not, but at least we're not lying about it anymore. Dominic raised his glass. To whatever this is. Complicated, messy, and probably a terrible idea. Arya clinked her glass against his. The best things usually are. They finished dinner while cameras flashed outside. Arya saw the photos going up in real time, watched the hashtags trend on Twitter, read the instant analysis from people who'd never met either of them but had strong opinions about their relationship. Walking out of the restaurant, Dominic took her hand. The gesture was simple but deliberate, a statement caught by a dozen cameras. Arya squeezed back, feeling something shift inside her chest. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. That was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. The response was immediate and predictable. By morning, their dinner had been dissected from every angle. Relationship experts analyzed their body language. Legal analysts debated whether dating Dominic undermined Arya's credibility in the lawsuit. Social media users created memes, wrote fan fiction, and argued endlessly about whether this was a love story or a scandal. Arya's PR team went into overdrive. Michelle drafted 3 different statements before Arya finally approved one that was honest without being detailed. Arya Cole and Dominic Varelli have become close friends following the events at Varelli Industries. They're navigating a complicated situation with honesty and mutual respect. No further comment at this time. It wouldn't satisfy anyone, but it was the truth, and Arya was done lying, even by omission. Monday brought the expected backlash from Lena's legal team. They amended their lawsuit to include claims that Arya and Dominic had been romantically involved during the investigation, that Arya had deliberately sabotaged the Varelli marriage as part of a scheme to pursue Dominic. The claims were absurd. Arya had documentation proving she and Dominic barely spoke during her time at the estate, but they didn't need to be true to be damaging. The narrative they created was compelling. Scorned billionaire destroys innocent woman's marriage to steal her husband. This is going to discovery, Arya's lead attorney told her during an emergency meeting. They're going to subpoena everything, your emails, your phone records, testimony from everyone at the estate. They're looking for anything that suggests you and Dominic had contact during your investigation. We didn't. I have nothing to hide. Good. But they're also going to dig into your motivations. Why you really went undercover, what you hoped to gain, whether protecting your company was the whole story. The attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia, looked at her seriously. Arya, they're going to try to paint you as obsessed, unhinged, a woman who became fixated on Dominic and engineered this entire situation to get close to him. That's insane. It's a narrative, and narratives don't have to be true to be effective. Patricia pulled out a legal pad. We need to prepare for every possible angle of attack. Your relationship history, your mental health, every business decision you've made that could be interpreted as ruthless or vindictive. Arya felt sick. She'd known this would be invasive, but hearing it laid out so clinically made it real. They were going to dissect her entire life, looking for anything that could be used against her. Then we prepare, she said. Whatever they throw at us, we're ready. The next several weeks were a blur of legal preparation and media management. Arya gave depositions, provided documentation, spent hours with her legal team going over every moment of her time at the Varelli estate. They built a timeline proving she and Dominic had no significant contact during her investigation. They gathered testimony from Rosa and other staff members confirming Arya's professional behavior. But Lena's team was building their own case, complete with staff members willing to testify that Arya seemed suspicious, that she asked questions that went beyond normal curiosity, that she seemed obsessed with the Varelli family. The bought testimony Rosa had warned about was materializing exactly as predicted. People Arya had worked alongside, had shared meals with, were now claiming she'd been duplicitous from the start. Some probably believed it, reinterpreting her actions through the lens of what they now knew. Others were clearly lying for money. Either way, the effect was the same. The case became murky, he said, she said, impossible to adjudicate cleanly. Through it all, Dominic was steady. He gave his own deposition, clearly stating that he'd had minimal interaction with Arya during her time as Emma Cooper, that their relationship began only after the gala. He turned over his phone records, his emails, everything that proved the timeline Arya's lawyers were building. You didn't have to do this, Arya told him after one particularly grueling deposition. They were in her office, exhausted and wrung out. Yes, I did. Lena's using me as a weapon against you. I'm not going to let that happen. Dominic rubbed his face. Besides, it's the truth. We weren't involved until after everything exploded. That matters. The truth doesn't always win in court. So you keep saying, but maybe we get lucky. He reached across the desk, taking her hand. And if we don't, at least we tried. 3 months into the lawsuit, Lena's lawyers made a settlement offer. $25 million, a public apology, and an agreement that Arya would never speak publicly about Lena again. "It's a trap," Patricia said. "If you settle, you're admitting wrongdoing. Every news outlet will report it as confirmation that you were in the wrong. And if we don't settle, we go to trial. Could take another year, maybe more. It'll be expensive, invasive, and there's no guarantee we win." Patricia's expression was neutral. "It's your call." Arya sat with the offer for a week, turning it over in her mind. $25 million was nothing to her financially. Her company made that in a quarter. But the precedent it set bothered her. Settling felt like admitting that exposing cruelty and fraud was wrong, that she should have stayed in her lane and minded her own business. But fighting meant another year of this, another year of depositions and testimony, and watching her life get picked apart in public. Another year of Dominic being dragged through the mess she'd created. She called him before making a decision. "Lena's team offered to settle. Are you considering it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to fight on principle, but another part is just tired." Arya looked out her office window at the city below. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should do whatever lets you move on with your life." Dominic's voice was gentle. "You've already won, Arya. Marcus is in prison. The fraud's been exposed. My company's being rebuilt with actual oversight. Those things happened because of you. But Lena gets away with being cruel." "No, she doesn't. She lost her marriage, her social standing, her reputation. The fact that she's trying to sue her way back to relevance doesn't change that." He paused. "Sometimes winning doesn't mean destroying your enemy completely. Sometimes it just means walking away knowing you did the right thing." Arya closed her eyes. He was right, and she hated that he was right. Because walking away felt like losing, even though objectively she'd accomplished everything she'd set out to do. "I'll think about it," she said finally. 2 days later, she called Patricia. "Counteroffer, $10 million, no apology, no restrictions on my speech. And Lena has to donate $5 million to a workers' rights organization. She'll never agree to that. Then we go to trial. But at least we tried." To everyone's surprise, Lena agreed. The settlement was announced quietly, with both sides claiming victory. Lena's statement emphasized the financial payment and lack of apology. Arya's emphasized the charitable donation and her unrestricted right to tell her story. The media called it a draw. Arya called it done. The day the settlement went through, Arya and Dominic had dinner at her penthouse. No cameras, no performance, just two people sharing takeout and cheap wine because the expensive stuff felt too formal. "How do you feel?" Dominic asked. Relieved, angry, sad, Arya picked at her food, all of it at once. "That sounds about right." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Arya asked the question that had been bothering her for weeks. "Do you regret any of this? Meeting me? Getting pulled into the lawsuit? All of it?" Dominic set down his fork, considering. "I regret that it happened the way it did. I regret that Marcus betrayed me and my marriage was a lie and my company almost imploded." He met her eyes. "But I don't regret meeting you, even though it came from the worst circumstances possible." That's a very diplomatic answer. It's an honest one. He reached across the table. "You changed my life, Arya. Not all of those changes were good, but they were necessary. I was sleepwalking through my own existence. You woke me up. By destroying everything you'd built, by showing me it needed destroying." Dominic's grip tightened. "I'm rebuilding better now, cleaner, more honest. That's because of you." Arya felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She'd held herself together through depositions and media storms and public scrutiny, but genuine kindness almost broke her. "I don't know what we're doing," she whispered. "Neither do I, but I'm willing to figure it out if you are." Arya looked at him across the table, this man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago and was now something she couldn't quite name. Not quite a friend, not quite a partner, but something real and complicated and worth exploring. "Yeah," she said. "I'm willing." Outside, the city lights stretched to the horizon, a million stories unfolding in the darkness. Arya's was just one among many, complicated and messy and unfinished. But for the first time in months, she felt like maybe that was okay. Maybe completion wasn't the point. Maybe the point was just showing up honestly and seeing what happened next. Dominic stayed late, and they talked about everything except the lawsuit and the investigation. They talked about books and travel and the small details of their lives that had nothing to do with corporate empires or public scandals. Normal things, human things. When he finally left, well past midnight, Arya stood at her window watching the city and thinking about everything that had changed. She'd started this journey to protect her company and ended up protecting something else entirely, her own sense of what was right, regardless of the cost. The price had been high. Her privacy, her peace, her certainty about who she was and what she was capable of, but she'd paid it willingly. And somehow, standing here now, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. 6 months after the settlement, Arya stood in an empty warehouse in Queens, watching construction workers install the last of the equipment. The space had been a textile factory once, back when manufacturing still happened in New York City. Now it was being transformed into something else entirely, a training center and job placement hub for domestic workers, hospitality staff, and anyone else the economy had decided was expendable. Rosa stood beside her, clipboard in hand, looking simultaneously excited and overwhelmed. "You're sure about this? It's a lot of money." "I'm sure." Arya watched a worker bolt down a desk. "We've got funding for 3 years, partnerships with unions and advocacy groups, and a waiting list of people who need exactly what we're offering." The foundation had been Arya's idea, born from those 3 months of living invisible. She'd seen how domestic workers were treated, not just by Lena, but by the entire system that made them replaceable and powerless. She couldn't fix that system overnight, but she could create spaces where people learned skills that gave them options, connections that gave them support. Rosa had agreed to run it, leaving the Varelli estate for good. Dominic had offered her a generous severance package, but Rosa had turned it down, saying she'd rather earn her own way. Arya respected that, even as she made sure the foundation paid Rosa twice what she'd made as a housekeeper. "The first training session starts next week," Rosa said, consulting her clipboard. 60 people signed up, everything from hospitality management to small business development to workers' rights education. And the placement program? "We've got commitments from 40 employers so far. Hotels, restaurants, private households that agree to fair wages and respectful treatment." Rosa looked up. "It's actually happening." "Yeah." Arya felt something loosen in her chest. "It is." This was what winning looked like, she'd decided. Not destroying Lena Varelli or exposing Marcus Brennan, though those things had been necessary. Real winning was using what she'd learned to build something that lasted, something that gave other people the power she'd temporarily surrendered. Her phone buzzed. Dominic, texting. "How's the warehouse looking?" "Almost ready. You still coming to the opening?" "Wouldn't miss it. See you tonight?" Arya smiled. "Yeah, my place at 7. They'd settled into something over the past months. Not quite dating in any conventional sense, but not just friends either. They had dinner twice a week, sometimes at restaurants where cameras caught them, sometimes at one of their apartments where the world couldn't reach. They talked about work and family and the things that kept them up at night. They were careful with each other in ways that suggested both had been burned before. It worked. That was enough for now. The foundation's grand opening drew a surprising amount of media attention. Arya had tried to keep it low-key, but word got out anyway. By the time she arrived, there were cameras outside and reporters asking questions about whether this was penance for her undercover investigation. "This isn't penance," Arya told a journalist from the Times. "It's a response. I saw a problem up close, and I'm using my resources to address it. That's what people with wealth should be doing instead of building bigger houses and buying yachts." The quote went viral within hours. Some people praised her commitment to workers' rights. Others accused her of performative activism, of trying to buy her way back into good graces after the lawsuit. Arya ignored both extremes. The foundation would succeed or fail based on whether it actually helped people, not whether strangers on the internet approved of her motivations. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed. Bright paint, comfortable furniture, computers and training materials set up in organized stations. 60 people filled the space, most of them looking cautiously hopeful in the way people do when they've been disappointed before but are willing to try again. Rosa introduced Arya, keeping it simple. "This is Arya Cole. She funded this place, but more importantly,
She understands what it's like to be invisible. She's going to say a few words. Arya stood in front of the group, feeling the weight of their attention. These weren't investors or board members. These were people who worked jobs that broke their bodies and barely paid rent, who showed up every day to be treated like furniture by people who'd never know their names. "I'm not going to pretend I know what your lives are like," Arya started. "I spent 3 months working as a maid, but that was temporary. I could leave whenever I wanted. You don't have that luxury." A few people nodded. Someone in the back crossed their arms, skeptical. "What I learned in those 3 months is that the work you do is hard and necessary and undervalued. You make other people's lives comfortable while your own lives get harder. That's not right, and it's not sustainable." Arya paused, choosing her next words carefully. "This foundation can't fix the whole system, but it can give you tools. Training that leads to better jobs, networks that lead to opportunities, knowledge about your rights so you can't be exploited as easily." "What do you get out of it?" someone called from the middle of the room. Fair question. Arya met the woman's eyes. Peace of mind, maybe. The satisfaction of building something useful. "I don't know. I'm still figuring that out." She smiled slightly. "But here's what you get. Everything this place offers, no strings attached. We're not tracking you or requiring you to promote us or asking for gratitude. You show up, you learn, you build your life however you want. That's it." The skeptical looks didn't entirely disappear, but they softened. People who'd been used by systems their whole lives didn't trust easily. Arya didn't blame them. The rest of the event passed in a blur of conversations and tours and watching Rosa work the room like she'd been running foundations her whole life. Dominic showed up halfway through, staying in the background but offering quiet support when Arya needed a moment to breathe. "You did good," he said as the crowd thinned. "We'll see. Talk to me in a year when we know if any of this actually helps people." "It will. You're too stubborn to let it fail." Dominic smiled. "That's a compliment, by the way." "I know." They left together, ignoring the cameras that caught them walking to Arya's car. The photos would be online within the hour, analyzed and debated and turned into content. Arya had stopped caring. Let people think what they wanted. She knew the truth. The next several months fell into a rhythm. Arya ran her company, expanding into new markets while maintaining the culture she'd built. She visited the foundation weekly, talking to participants and adjusting programs based on what actually worked versus what sounded good on paper. She had dinner with Dominic and slowly, carefully, let herself believe this might turn into something real. Dominic was rebuilding too. Virelli Industries had lost contracts and clients, but the ones who stayed were solid. He'd restructured everything: new oversight, new culture, new priorities that put integrity over profit margins. It was slower, harder, less immediately profitable, but it was clean, and that mattered to him in ways it hadn't before. "I used to measure success by revenue growth," he told Arya one night. They were at his apartment, a penthouse he rarely used because it reminded him of Lena. "Now I measure it by how many nights I can sleep without worrying someone's stealing from me." That's depressing. "It's realistic." Dominic poured them both wine. "Marcus took a lot from me. Money, sure, but also my ability to trust my own judgment. I'm still working through that." "You're getting there, though." "Am I? Because some days I feel like I'm just going through the motions, pretending I've learned something when really I'm just more paranoid." He took a sip. "How do you trust people after someone betrays you that badly?" Arya understood the question too well. She'd been asking herself variations of it since her first CFO's betrayal. "I don't think you ever trust the same way again, but you can choose to trust anyway, knowing the risks. Conscious trust instead of blind trust." That sounds exhausting. It is, but the alternative is being alone. Arya met his eyes. "You have to decide which exhausts you more." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his wine and crossed to where she sat. "I'm choosing not to be alone, just so we're clear." "Yeah, me too." He kissed her then, finally, after months of careful distance and unspoken tension. It felt like a decision they were both making deliberately, eyes open to the complications and choosing each other anyway. When they pulled apart, Arya laughed. "That took long enough." "I wanted to be sure." "And are you?" "Getting there." Dominic smiled. "Ask me again in a year."
The Foundation's 6-month report exceeded expectations. 42 people had completed training programs. 31 had been placed in better jobs with higher wages and actual benefits. The numbers were small in the grand scheme of poverty and inequality, but they represented real lives that had changed in measurable ways. Rosa presented the findings to Arya over coffee, her pride evident. We've got people asking if we can expand. Open locations in other cities, serve more participants. Can we handle that? Not yet. We need to solidify what we're doing here first, make sure the model actually works long term. Rosa made notes. But in a year or two? Maybe. Arya approved the timeline, trusting Rosa's judgment. This was the part of wealth she'd never fully appreciated before. The ability to fund things that mattered and then step back, letting people who knew what they were doing actually do it. 8 months after the settlement, Lena Varelli resurfaced. She gave an interview to a major magazine, positioned as a comeback story. The piece profiled her time in rehab, her journey toward sobriety, her new perspective on what mattered. It was carefully crafted PR, designed to rehabilitate her image. But buried in the interview was something that surprised Arya. Lena admitted, carefully and with qualifications, that she'd been cruel. I was dealing with things I didn't know how to process, Lena said in the article. My marriage was falling apart. I felt invisible in my own life, and I took that out on people who couldn't fight back. That was wrong. I'm working on being better. It wasn't a full apology. It didn't name Arya or acknowledge the specific ways she'd been terrible, but it was more than Arya had expected. What do you think? Simone asked, having sent Arya the article. I think her publicist is smart. Arya read through the piece again. But I also think maybe she means some of it. People can change, even people like Lena. You're being generous. I'm being realistic. Holding on to anger at her doesn't serve me. Arya closed her laptop. She lost everything that mattered to her. Whether she becomes a better person is her business, not mine. That's very evolved of you. It's very tired of me. Arya smiled. I don't have the energy to hate her anymore. I'd rather build things. That philosophy carried through the rest of the year. Arya focused on TechCore's expansion, on the Foundation's growth, on the relationship with Dominic that was becoming something she could almost call love, though neither of them had said the word yet. Marcus Brennan was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. The organized crime connections he'd exposed led to a dozen more arrests, dismantling a network that had been operating for over a decade. Arya read about the sentencing online, feeling nothing. Marcus had made his choices, and now he'd live with the consequences. That was how it worked. The 1-year anniversary of the gala arrived without fanfare. Arya marked it privately, thinking about the woman in the midnight blue dress who'd exposed an empire. She felt distant from that version of herself now, like watching a stranger make decisions Arya had agreed with, but wouldn't make the same way again. Any regrets? Dominic asked. They were having dinner at the Italian place where they'd been photographed a year ago, deliberately returning to the scene. About the investigation? No. About how I handled the aftermath, maybe. Arya considered, I would have been gentler with Lena if I'd known how far she'd fall. Not because she didn't deserve consequences, but because watching someone actually break under them is different than imagining it. That's growth. That's recognizing I'm not as tough as I thought I was. Arya smiled. Turns out empathy is inconvenient. Most worthwhile things are. They'd been together almost a year now, if you counted from that first dinner in Brooklyn. Not living together, both too independent for that, but committed in ways that mattered. Dominic had keys to Arya's apartment. Arya knew the code to his building, small intimacies that added up to trust. I love you, Dominic said suddenly, like he'd been holding it back and couldn't anymore. Arya's heart jumped. They'd been circling this for months, both too cautious to say it first. Yeah? Yeah, I probably have for a while, but I wanted to be sure it wasn't just trauma bonding, or gratitude, or whatever else people might say this is. He reached across the table. It's not. I love you because you're brilliant and stubborn, and you give a damn about things that matter, because you make me want to be better. Because when I'm with you, I feel like myself instead of the version of myself I built for other people. Arya felt tears threaten, unexpected but not unwelcome. I love you too, even though you're a disaster who trusted the wrong people and let your life fall apart.
Especially because of that? Maybe. She squeezed his hand. We're both disasters.
At least we're disasters together. It wasn't romantic in any conventional sense, but it was honest, and after everything they'd been through, honesty mattered more than poetry. 2 years after the gala, the foundation opened its second location in Chicago. Rosa had built a team, developed a curriculum that worked, created partnerships that sustained the work beyond Aria's initial funding. The model was replicable, which meant it could scale. You did this, Aria told Rosa at the Chicago opening. We did this, Rosa corrected. You gave me the resources and trusted me to use them right. That matters. The Chicago space was twice the size of the Queen's warehouse, serving a neighborhood where domestic workers and service industry employees lived 3 families to an apartment and worked multiple jobs to survive. The need was overwhelming, but the foundation was making a dent. Aria watched participants fill the space, saw the same cautious hope she'd seen in Queens 2 years ago. Some of these people would use what they learned here to build better lives. Some wouldn't. But they'd all have the chance, and that was more than the system had given them before. Your 5 o'clock is here, someone said. Aria turned to find Julian Reeves, Lena's brother, standing in the doorway looking uncomfortable. They hadn't spoken since his interview defending Aria. She'd sent him a thank you note, but that had been the extent of their contact. Julian, this is a surprise. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should come. He shifted his weight. But I wanted to see what you'd built, and to tell you something. Aria led him to a quiet corner. What's going on? Lena's getting remarried, some finance guy she met in group therapy. Julian's expression was complicated. She seems happy, or at least more stable, but before the wedding she asked me to reach out to you. Aria tensed. Why? She wants to apologize. Actually apologize, not the PR version. Julian pulled out his phone, showing Aria a message. She wrote this. Asked me to pass it along because she didn't think you'd answer if she contacted you directly. The message was long and detailed. Lena acknowledged her cruelty, named specific incidents, took responsibility without qualifications or excuses. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to explain away her behavior. She just admitted she'd been wrong and said she was sorry. Aria read it twice, processing. What do you think I should do? That's up to you. But for what it's worth, I think she means it. Julian pocketed his phone. She's been sober 18 months, in therapy, actually dealing with her issues instead of medicating them with shopping and cruelty. She's not the same person you met. People don't change that fast. Maybe not completely, but they can start. Julian met her eyes. You of all people should know that. You're not the same person who walked into that gala either. He was right. Aria had changed in ways she was still discovering. The woman who'd planned that dramatic reveal wouldn't have built a foundation or fallen in love with the man whose life she'd helped destroy. She'd grown past that version of herself, become someone messier and more uncertain, but also more human. Tell her I got the message, Aria said finally, and that I accept her apology. You want to meet with her? No, but I'm done carrying anger at her. She can move on with her life and I'll move on with mine. Julian nodded, understanding. That's fair. And Aria? Thank you. For the foundation, for being honest about who Lena was, for all of it. You did what someone should have done years ago. After he left, Aria stood alone thinking about forgiveness and growth, and whether people ever really changed or just learned to manage their worst impulses better. She didn't have answers, just questions that felt more honest than certainty. 3 years after the gala, TechCore Industries announced a major initiative partnering with the foundation. They'd hire graduates directly, providing entry-level positions with career advancement paths. Other companies followed, creating a pipeline from service work to corporate jobs for people who'd been told they weren't qualified for anything better. Aria announced it at a press conference, fielding questions about whether this was good business or social activism. It's both, she said. Companies that invest in overlooked talent get dedicated employees. Individuals get opportunities they've earned but never had access to. Everyone wins. The program launched to significant media coverage. Some outlets praised it as innovative corporate responsibility. Others accused Arya of exploiting the publicity from her investigation for business gain. She'd learned to ignore both extremes, focusing instead on whether the work was actually helping people. Dominic attended the press conference, standing in the back with a smile that said he was proud, but trying not to be obvious about it. They'd been together 3 years now, long enough that the media had moved on to newer scandals. Occasionally, someone still asked about how they got together, and they'd deflect with practiced ease. The truth was complicated and nobody's business but theirs. That evening, back at Arya's apartment, Dominic opened a bottle of champagne. "To overlook talent," he said, raising his glass. "To second chances," Arya countered. "To building something that lasts." They drank to all of it, to the messy path that had brought them here and the uncertain future stretching ahead. Arya thought about the woman she'd been 4 years ago, so certain about right and wrong, about justice and consequences. That woman had been brave but also rigid, unable to see the gray spaces between her clear-cut categories. This version of herself was softer, more uncertain, willing to sit with complexity instead of forcing resolution. She didn't know if that made her better or just older. Maybe there wasn't a difference. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic asked. "How different everything is from what I expected." Arya settled against him. "I thought I'd expose fraud, protect my company, and move on. Instead, I accidentally started a movement and fell in love with you. None of that was the plan. The best things never are. That's a greeting card philosophy. Doesn't make it wrong." Dominic kissed her forehead. "We could have stayed in our separate corners, rebuilding alone. Instead, we're here. I'll take it." "Yeah, me too." 5 years after the gala, the foundation had expanded to 6 cities and served over 3,000 people. Employment rates among graduates ran at 73%, with average wage increases of 42% compared to pre-program employment. The numbers told one story. The individual lives behind them told thousands more. Rosa had become a national voice on workers' rights, speaking at conferences and advising other organizations on replicable models. She'd also gotten married to Gregory of all people, the estate manager from the Virelli household. They'd reconnected at the Queen's opening and discovered they actually liked each other outside of work context. "Life is weird," Rosa told Arya at the wedding. 5 years ago, I was cleaning bathrooms for people who didn't see me as human. Now I'm running a foundation and marrying someone who actually values what I do. You always did work that mattered. Now you're just getting recognized for it. Because you saw me. When you could have stayed invisible or looked the other way, you saw us." Rosa's voice got fierce. "That changed everything." Arya accepted the gratitude, though it still felt strange. She'd been selfish in her investigation, protecting her own interests. The broader impact had been unintended, almost accidental. But maybe that didn't matter. Maybe the intention mattered less than the outcome. Dominic proposed on a random Tuesday. No drama or grand gesture. They were having dinner at her apartment, talking about work and whether they should adopt a cat, when he pulled out a ring. "This isn't how this usually goes," he said. "There's supposed to be a plan and a speech and probably better lighting. But I'm tired of waiting for the perfect moment. This is the moment. You, me, leftover Thai food, and a conversation about cats. It's perfect because it's us." Arya laughed, feeling tears she didn't bother hiding. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "Is that a yes?" "Obviously it's a yes, you disaster." She took the ring, simple and beautiful and exactly right. "But we're getting a cat before the wedding. Non-negotiable." They married 6 months later, small ceremony with people who mattered. Rosa and Gregory, Nathan and Simone, Julian Reeves, who'd become an unexpected friend, a handful of others who'd been there through the chaos. No press, no cameras, no performance. Just 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new. The media found out anyway, of course. Photos from guests leaked online, spawning another round of analysis about the billionaire CEO and the man whose empire she'd exposed. But by then, Arya had learned to let the narrative exist separate from her reality. People would think what they wanted. She and Dominic knew the truth. 7 years after the gala, Arya stepped back from TechCore's day-to-day operations, transitioning to chairman while Nathan took over as CEO. She stayed involved in strategy and major decisions, but the everyday running of the company went to someone else. "Are you sure about this?" the board asked during the transition meeting.
I'm sure. Nathan's been ready for this job for years, and I've got other work I want to focus on. Arya smiled. The foundation, mostly. It's grown beyond what I can manage part-time. The truth was, she'd gotten tired of quarterly earnings calls and investor relations. The foundation challenged her differently, required skills she was still developing. She was good at building companies. She wanted to get good at building systems that helped people build themselves. Dominic made a similar transition, bringing in new leadership at Varelli Industries while he focused on sustainable construction projects that actually interested him. They were both still wealthy, still influential, still operating in spaces of tremendous privilege. But they were trying to use that privilege intentionally now, consciously, with eyes open to its limitations and responsibilities. The foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary with a gala, Arya's idea of irony, in the same ballroom where everything had started. The space had been remodeled since then, but the bones were the same. Arya stood on the same stage where she'd exposed Marcus and humiliated Lena, looking out at a very different crowd. Current and former participants filled the room, people who'd used the foundation as a springboard to better lives. Employers who'd partnered with them, advocates and organizers who'd helped build the movement. Rosa and her team, proud of what they'd created together. 10 years ago, I stood on this stage and told a truth that needed telling, Arya said into the microphone. Tonight, I'm standing here to celebrate what came after that truth, the work you've all done to build something that lasts. She talked about the numbers: 10 cities, 12,000 people served, employment rates that exceeded national averages, wage increases that actually moved people towards stability. But she also talked about what the numbers represented: parents who could afford decent housing, students who could go to college, people who'd been invisible finally being seen. I didn't do this alone, Arya continued. Rosa built the programs. Gregory managed operations. Each of you contributed something essential. This isn't my foundation. It's ours. The applause was genuine, warm. Arya stepped off the stage feeling lighter than she had in years. Dominic found her afterward, champagne in hand. Good speech. It was honest. Arya accepted the glass. That's all I've got these days. It's enough. They stood together watching people celebrate, and Arya thought about the journey that had brought her here. The desperate decision to go undercover, the 3 months of invisibility, the dramatic reveal and messy aftermath, the lawsuit and the media circus, and the slow, difficult work of building something meaningful from the wreckage. None of it had been clean. Most of it had been harder than she expected. But standing here now, married to someone who'd survived adjacent disasters and built a partnership from shared understanding, watching people celebrate opportunities they'd earned but never had access to before, it felt like maybe it had been worth it. Not perfect, not complete, but worth it. What are you thinking? Dominic asked. That power isn't what I thought it was. Arya leaned against him. I used to think it was about money and control and winning. But real power is creating space for other people to win, building something that keeps working after you're gone. That's very wise. That's very tired. Arya smiled. I'm getting old. We're 38. Exactly. Ancient. They laughed, and somewhere across the room, Rosa caught Arya's eye and raised her glass. Arya raised hers back, a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd both come from that basement staff kitchen where Emma Cooper had eaten lunch and tried to be invisible. The party continued late into the night. People danced and talked and celebrated the imperfect, necessary work they'd built together. Arya circulated through the crowd, listening to stories about lives that had changed in small but measurable ways. A woman who'd gone from cleaning hotel rooms to managing them. A man who'd used culinary training to open his own restaurant. A single mother who'd secured stable housing for the first time in years. These were the victories that mattered, Arya had learned. Not the dramatic reveals or the headlines, but the quiet accumulation of better days for people who'd been told they didn't deserve them. Near midnight, she and Dominic slipped out to the balcony overlooking the grounds. The estate looked different than it had during her time as Emma Cooper. New landscaping, updated lighting, different energy. Or maybe Arya just saw it differently now, without the lens of deception between her and reality. Do you ever regret it? Dominic asked. The whole undercover thing. Everything that came after? Arya considered the question one final time. Did she regret it? The methods had been questionable.
The consequences had rippled in ways she couldn't have predicted. She'd hurt people, even people who'd deserved it. She'd exposed herself to scrutiny and criticism that would follow her forever. But she'd also learned who she was when stripped of her identity and wealth. She'd built something that mattered. She'd fallen in love with someone real. She'd discovered that character wasn't about how you acted when everyone was watching, but how you treated people when you thought nobody cared. "No," she said finally, "I don't regret it. I might do some things differently if I could go back. But the core of it, seeing the truth and acting on it, no regrets." "Good, because I don't regret it either." Dominic pulled her closer. "Even though you destroyed my life, I gave you the chance to rebuild it better." "Same thing, really." They stood together on the balcony, looking out at the city lights beyond the estate walls. Somewhere out there, people were living lives the foundation had helped stabilize. Somewhere, Marcus was serving his sentence. Somewhere, Lena was building her second marriage and trying to be better than she'd been. And here, in this moment, Arya and Dominic were simply two people who'd survived separate disasters and found each other in the aftermath. That was the real story, Arya thought. Not the dramatic exposure or the viral videos or the media frenzy. Just two imperfect people choosing each other repeatedly, building something honest from the ruins of their separate lives. The ballroom lights glowed behind them. Music drifted out through open doors. Inside, people celebrated 10 years of work that mattered, work that would continue long after tonight ended. Arya had started this journey trying to protect her company. She'd ended it learning that some things mattered more than quarterly earnings or corporate reputation. Community mattered. Justice mattered. The quiet, unglamorous work of showing up for people who'd been overlooked mattered. And love, messy, complicated, built on honesty rather than illusion, that mattered most of all. "Ready to go back in?" Dominic asked. "In a minute." Arya turned to face him, this man who'd been a stranger, then a subject of investigation, then somehow the person she trusted most. "I just want to remember this moment, before we go back to the noise and the work and everything else." "What about this moment? That we made it here? That we survived and built something real and actually became better instead of just more careful?" She smiled. "That's worth remembering." Dominic kissed her forehead. "Yeah, it is." They stood together a moment longer, then walked back inside to rejoin the celebration. The Foundation's next decade stretched ahead of them, full of work and challenges and opportunities to keep building. TechCore would continue growing under Nathan's leadership. Varelli Industries would keep pushing toward cleaner business practices, and Arya and Dominic would navigate it together. Two people who'd learned the hard way that power without character was empty, but character without action was useless. The real strength, they'd discovered, came from combining both, using privilege and resources to create opportunities for others. Being honest about mistakes while working to do better. Building something that lasted beyond their own egos or needs. That was the lesson, if there was one. That exposure and accountability were necessary but not sufficient. That real change required sustained effort and humility and willingness to be wrong. That sometimes you had to destroy everything to discover what was worth rebuilding. Arya had gone undercover to protect her company and ended up protecting something more important, her own integrity and the dignity of people who'd been invisible too long. That was worth 3 months of scrubbing floors. Worth the lawsuits and the media storms and the complicated journey from that moment on the stage to this moment on the balcony. Worth every difficult, messy, imperfect step of becoming someone who cared more about being right than about winning. The party continued around them, and Arya let herself enjoy it. Tomorrow there'd be work to do. There was always work to do. But tonight, surrounded by people who'd built something meaningful together, she let herself simply be present. Not a CEO or a whistleblower or a headline, just Arya, flawed and trying, and finally at peace with both. That felt like enough.